And for the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, thank you for being here tonight on this sunny evening. Before we get going, I'll just introduce our participants up front. My name is Casey Morrisroe, and I'm our board chair. To my far right is Miss Lynn Town, clerk of the board, and Dr. Stephen Cook, our superintendent. To my immediate left is Lisa May, our vice chair, Tom Hearn, a trustee, Tambra Pickford, trustee, and Jen Brumley, trustee. Public comment on district-related items is scheduled near the start of the meeting. Please sign in on the sheet provided at the entrance door. Because of the diversity of issues, members of the board will not respond to public comment made during tonight's meeting. Instead, issues may be recorded and referred to the proper staff person for follow-up. Comments may also be submitted in writing through the clerk of the board. Okay, is there a motion to approve tonight's agenda?
Second.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded. We're fighting over who seconded it, but we'll. Okay, any discussion on the agenda? All right, all in favor? Aye. Aye. Any opposed? No. Okay. Board recognition here. Dr. Cook, are you going first?
I am.
Okay.
Good evening. April was National Volunteer Month, and we want to take a couple of minutes to celebrate the many parents, grandparents, and community members who give their time and talents to help in our classrooms, on field trips, and in many other ways in our schools. How many volunteers are we talking about? As of last count, we have had 1,226 individual volunteers in our school district this school year alone. That's the equivalent of 1 for every 9 students enrolled in our district. We are very grateful and we love seeing our volunteers every day. We asked our teachers and school staff to share some photos of them, which we'd like to show you now. How about a nice round of applause for our volunteers? All right, now let's talk about Run for 271. Come on up. This is super cool. Come on up. So she thinks she's here to do a commercial. All right, Run for 271 is right around the corner on Saturday, June 1st. This is a fun family event in our community that has grown bigger and better every year. Tonight, the Board of Trustees and I want to recognize the success of Run for 271, and that means celebrating an individual who has worked tirelessly to build it up from humble beginnings. She has no idea we're doing this. From humble beginnings as a small fun run at Ramsey School into a major community event that benefits all of our elementary schools. I'm talking about Elena Matthews, the director of Run for 271. Let's give her a round of applause. Although she's had some help, Elena has been the driving force behind this event for the past 8 years. The idea was simple: provide an awesome experience for kids and their families that promote fun and fitness and raises money for our community schools. In the beginning, the proceeds for the run went to support our elementary PE programs, but as Elena spoke with principals, she learned the needs vary greatly from school to school. And so the money raised now is dedicated to a variety of school needs, such as classroom libraries, crisis counseling, art enrichment, and extracurricular programming like Math is Cool and cross country. Over the years, Run for 271 has raised almost $90,000 for the elementary schools in our district. Last year alone, they brought in $38,000. We have a new video promoting Run for 271 recorded by Elena last week, and we'd love to show it to you right now.
Are you ready to run for your elementary school? Hello, I'm Elena Matthews with Run for 271, the annual event that promotes healthy and happy living for our local youth. Join us on Saturday, June 1st, as we celebrate the 8th year of this amazing morning of family fun at McEwen Park. The popular Kids Obstacle Course is back for ages 2 through 12, and we also have an obstacle course special needs wave for all ages. We will have a 5K all ages run and a 1-mile fun run too. Plus, our big raffle is back, as well as bounce houses, food trucks, music and stage performances, face painting, arts and crafts, and a lot more. Run for 271 is an important fundraiser for the 11 elementary schools in Coeur d'Alene School District. 100% of the proceeds go directly toward classroom libraries, PE programs, music and art education, health and wellness programs, playground equipment, cross-country, math activities, and a lot more. Last year, we raised nearly $38,000 for our elementary schools. This happens with the strong support of families in our school district and our generous community and sponsors. Packet pickup begins at 7 a.m. on June 1st. The 1-mile run starts at 8:30 a.m., the 5K starts at 9 a.m., and the obstacle runs start at 10 a.m. So the whole family can be involved with one of our fun events. To register, go to runfor271.org and check us out on Facebook. Ticket prices begin at $10. Please help us support our local elementary schools. We'll see you on June 1st at Run for 271.
I'd also like to add that Elena is handing over the reins to a new director of Run for 271, Diego Olivieri. Is that right?
I don't know how to say it either.
Okay. But she plans on staying involved. So I'd like to formally present from the Board of Trustees the Superstar Award presented to Elena Matthews. We celebrate your vision, passion, and dedication and direction for Run 271 for the past 8 years, bringing families together for a healthy and enjoyable spring activity while also providing substantial financial support for our elementary schools. Thank you for all you have done in support of our children and our community. Get your picture taken. Come here.
I'm going to have words with you, Scott.
Okay, now you can talk about Run for 271.
I think I just did on that gigantic screen that adds 10 pounds. So I'll just say a couple of things because you all heard about it. So my mom was a teacher. She taught, probably every single grade. She ended up being a principal and a assistant superintendent down in the biggest county down in Utah. So that's kind of where the passion comes from. I saw all the hours she worked and the little paycheck she got. And, every time we went to the grocery store, a kid would run up to her, and adults always come to her and talk about what a difference she made. I'm gonna cry because I think teachers are amazing. So I wanted to do something to give back. I think paying it forward is huge, and I think we should be teaching kids and all the way up to give back to their communities and praise the people who deserve it and work so hard. So we wanted to give money to the kids and to the teachers and to the principals, and we weren't sure how to do that, so we talked to the principals at every elementary school, figure out, what can we do, where do you need money, which teachers need libraries, who needs supplies, that kind of thing. So that's the motivation. 100% of your registration money goes directly to the schools, so when you register, you can decide which elementary school gets your money, or you can say you don't have a preference if you want it to be split. Last year was our biggest year. We raised $38,000, which was huge. The first year I did it, we raised $2,025, so we've grown quite a bit in those years, and we're hoping to pass that $100,000 mark this year, and I'm sure we will. So if you guys can come June 1st, McEwen Park, we'd love to have you there.
Oh, one more picture. Nope. That's it for recognitions.
So next up is our Invest, Inspire, and Innovate and Shining Star Awards. And this is Teacher Appreciation Week. I have to say, every year I'm a slacker. Every year I know this week comes upon me, and I always tell my kids, like, they want to follow I got to bring my teacher their favorite drink or wear their favorite color or whatever. They give you those wonderful suggestions, and every year I'm just horrible at it. I'm like, by Wednesday I will have everything, and they will absolutely love it. So anyways, we love our teachers in our house too. We're so grateful for all that they do. And the Teacher of the Month for April is a library media specialist at Coeur d'Alene High School, Kirsten Coeur. And Teacher of the Month at Lakes Middle School is Vicki Julin. She's language, art, science, and first aid. And a 5th grade teacher at Winton Elementary is Katie Levitt. And a Shining Star Award is Paula Moore. Yes, I said that right. Employee of the Month. She's Special Education Instructional Assistant at Campfield Middle School. And our next Shining Star Award is Joe Mares, Employee of the Month. He's a lead mechanic at District Transportation Office. So please join me in congratulating them and thanking them.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Pickford. As part of their winning, they don't have to come here.
Yes.
That's part of their prize. We don't make them come here. Okay, we're going to go to our high school student body reports. And I'm going to start with Venture High School tonight. Is anyone from Venture here? Okay, Lake City.
Good evening, esteemed board chair, honorable trustees, superintendent Cook, and district administration. My name is Amani Pereira, and I am the ASB president at Lake City High School. With me tonight are ASB Vice President Emma Bull, ASB Treasurer Claire Mitchell, and ASB Secretary Chloe Teets. I have the pleasure this evening of introducing our new ASB officers for next year. ASB President Jacob Baker, ASB Vice President Sam Putrin, ASB Secretary Emily Damshin, and ASB Treasurer Carter Gordon. I know I speak for Emma, Claire, and Chloe when I say that it has been an honor to serve as ASB officers this year, and we know we're leaving the school in good hands with these new officers. Spring is always a busy time at Lake City. In addition to seniors getting ready for graduation, we have spring sports in full swing, student council class elections are happening this month, and AP testing starts this week. Our senior prom was this last Saturday, and it was a beautiful and elegant event for our seniors who are now gearing up for senior projects being presented on the evening of May 22nd. We would also like to personally invite you to all 2 events. First, on Friday, June 7th at 7:30 a.m., we have our Honors Senior Breakfast. The top 11 students in our senior class have breakfast with their families and all of you at the Resort Golf Course Event Center. We would love for all of you to attend this uniquely emotional and memorable event. Finally, on Saturday, June 8th, is our graduation ceremony. The ceremony itself begins at 11 o'clock a.m. In order to avoid parking issues and to have time for orientation, we invite you to arrive by 10:15 a.m. We have a beautiful brunch in our office conference room, and board members and district administration are welcome to join us. Thank you all for that you've contributed to the success of our Lake City class of 2019 and to our individual accomplishments. As I said earlier, it's been an honor to speak to you this year, and we can't wait to see Lake City continue to thrive next year under the leadership of Jacob, Sam, Emily, and Carter. Thank you again for all the opportunities to be here this year. Good night.
Okay, thank you, ladies. Coeur d'Alene High School.
Hi there. Thank you for having me. My name's Geneva Bankson. I am an ASB officer at Coeur d'Alene, and with me today is Megan Coeur. She's running for one of our ASB positions for next year. So April was a little bit of a slow month for us. Our main event was our mother-son, father-daughter dance, Sunrise Sunset, which is a long-standing tradition for our CHS seniors. This event went extremely well across the board, thanks to help from our student council and our admin team. Our drama department just closed their production of Beauty and the Beast last week, and it was their most successful play ever. We are so proud of them. After a slow start to their seasons due to the weather, our spring sports are now in full swing, with senior nights and state tournaments quickly approaching. Our DECA and BPA students both just returned from national competitions, DECA in Orlando and BPA in Anaheim. Both programs had students make finals, which are the first to be done by CHS students. During the month of May, our school has 3 main events coming up that our student council has been working tirelessly on. First, we have our senior prom, which is coming up this Saturday the 11th at the Hagedorn Event Center. Our theme this year is Great Gatsby, and we are looking for a huge turnout this year. Following that, on Monday the 13th is our mother-daughter tea, which is being held in our commons. In order to get everything donated, our student council reached out to businesses in the community, and we are able to make our tickets free this year so that all senior girls and their moms can enjoy this event. The week of May 20th are our ASB elections, followed by class elections that same week. We have many people running for all offices, so it's going to be a very tough race this year. Mr. CHS is coming up at the end of the month, which is our parody pageant that our senior boys put on each year. The theme this year is based off the TV show The Bachelor. We are going to have a huge turnout of contestants and escorts, so I think we're going to have a really creative and exciting show this year. I would love to invite you all to attend if you are free on the night of May 30th. You will not regret it. Thank you so much for having me tonight.
Okay, thank you. All right, Mr. Twitchell, you ready with the Coeur d'Alene Education Association report?
Alrighty, Board Chair Morrisroe, school board members, Superintendent Cook, district employees, friends, guests, everybody else, thank you for having me up here and once again allowing me to be here. So as you know, I always got to start with the story though. So this action out this past week, 2 weeks ago, my computer came up missing, and it was so I assume it was stolen. It's one I've had for a few years, meant a lot to me. But one of the things that I really got a lot of use out of was Microsoft Office on it. I mean, a lot of people have switched over to Google Docs. I still love my Microsoft Office. And so if I can, look into the camera and just say, whoever stole that, I will find you. You have my word. Okay. Word, Microsoft Office. All right. All right. Okay, maybe they're getting worse. I don't know how they could, though, but all righty. So, as been stated, it's been kind of slow lately, which is great. First, though, just like to kind of talk, and this links back to negotiations a little bit, which we're going to be officially getting started on soon, and we're looking forward to that. I can tell you that I myself am really looking forward to it, because as soon as we finish with that, then that will end my reign of terror as president. And so I'll still try to show up and say some bad jokes once in a while, though. But recently we learned from the state that the state legislature decided to slip in something a little extra that has to do with raises for teachers. And while we really appreciate raises, when it is unfunded, that is not so appreciated. And so with that said, I would just like to encourage everybody, when it comes time to vote, please take a look at those candidates that really, really support the free public education as our Constitution mandates, and vote for those people. So it does not put school districts and negotiations teams in a pickle. We're in a tough situation when it comes time to having to deal with these unfunded mandates. We have been continuing along with CAPS, and we would just like to say thank you to the board and to the district once again for this process. It's been fantastic. We appreciate the transparency. The budget meetings that we've been having with Katie have been absolutely fantastic. She does a great job. In fact, she was telling me the other day that she wants to give more presentations. And so please ask her to do more of those. She's just shy and modest. It's okay. She loves them. Lastly, tomorrow night, being the week of Teacher Appreciation Week, tomorrow night we have the Retirement and Recognition Dinner, where we're hoping to see, I don't know, all of you, some of you possibly. I know that if all of you are there, then it has to be a meeting, but hopefully Tom Hearn can be there to do some lip syncing once again, or maybe give us some of his original songs that we know he enjoys. It is one of my favorite events of the year, if not my favorite event, and I know it's hard to believe compared to school board meetings, but it does rank a little bit higher. We're not going to have any bouncy houses there like at the Run for 271, but it is always a lot of fun, where we'll be recognizing those people that have worked long and hard for the district, are retiring. We'll also be presenting the Rookie of the Year, Elementary Educator of the Year, Middle School Educator of the Year Award, High School Educator of the Year Award, and then out of those, the Educator of the Year, who then will be our nominee to the state, where in years past we have done quite well. So thank you very much.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Twitchell. Okay, Board of Trustee comments. We have none, so we're at public comment. Get my public comment script, Ms. Town. Aha, now I know what to say. Okay, so I want to remind the public, while this is a meeting of the Board of Trustees that takes place in public, it is not a meeting with the public. It is a meeting of the board to conduct district business. The board does allow some limited public comment on district-related items. Those wishing to address the board during public comment period are limited to one comment not to exceed 3 minutes. If you have additional comments that you'd like to present to the board, you may provide those comments in writing through our clerk of the board, Ms. Lynn Town. Ms. Town will ensure that the board members receive this additional commentary. Please keep in mind that board members will not respond to public comment. If I determine that an individual statement is too lengthy, personally directed, abusive, or repetitive, I may terminate that speaker's privilege to address the board. Okay, we've got a couple people tonight, and first up is Scott Jordan. Good evening. If you'll just, if you haven't been with us before, just approach the podium over there. I just want to make sure the red light's on, so there's a red button there with the light below that. Sounds like it's on. Welcome.
I'm just keen to let you know that I'm running for Lakes Highway District this year. I want to be more transparent for the schools to help them get things designed and that it'll work with them better. I'm a real strong advocate for the athletics of the high school, the marathons and all that, and I just want to let people know that I'm on the Dalton Gardens. Oh boy, I'm not a good speaker. It's different when I'm up there. And I'm on the city council at Dalton Gardens, and I want to run for Lakes Highway District, and I'd like to get on and be a little more transparent. They've got some good people on there, and I think I could help out a lot. And I'd like to have your vote and at least give it a consideration. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Jordan. Next up is Patrick O'Halloran.
Good evening, and thank you for your time. I am Patrick O'Halloran. I am here on in my capacity at North Idaho College, I am the Director of Aerospace there. I'm also a member of the board of the Idaho Aerospace Alliance. And in that capacity, wanted to mention a good opportunity for students that's coming to your town. I'll leave more of these flyers after the fact. But as I describe, I'll go to the web address that is the significant point. Aerospace is a growing, and I dare say starting to thrive, industry in northern Idaho. The industry themselves convenes in collaboration annually with Spokane Industry Group and the Idaho Aerospace Alliance over on this side. It's turned into an alternating year event, one year in Spokane and the other year in Coeur d'Alene. This year, in late May, at the Coeur d'Alene Resort, they're getting together, the industry that is, 50 or more manufacturers mainly, but people interested and invested in this industry to have their time together. Once they have set everything up, though, on the evening of May 28th, they're throwing the doors open to students. This would be ideal for middle schoolers and older on through college that have some interest in STEM, or you name it, if they just want to explore career opportunities in the aerospace arena or interested in technology, if they want to see the latest whiz-bang, everything in 3D printing. The speaker that evening will be Tyler Alvarado of Continuous Composites in downtown Coeur d'Alene, who will invite them in at the end, toward the end of the meeting. From 5 p.m. to 7 p.m. on May 28th, interested students can claim a ticket by going to, I'll read it once and then spell it out, but bit.ly /I90 Aero. So that's bit.ly. I have it here, don't worry. bit.ly /I90 AERO. So that's mainly a head count. The event itself, to attend that, the displays are already set up. It will be free. Parking, that's your own event. This is mostly for head count, and there will be some food, so there is going to be a cap, so get them while they last is the advice on the tickets. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Thanks for sharing that opportunity with us. We will get the word out on that. Okay, next up is Troy Braga.
Yep.
Good evening, Troy.
Good evening. My name is Troy Braga. I have two fourth grade students at Fernand Elementary, boy-girl twins, and there's a couple topics I wanted to discuss real quick. None of this is going to be covered in 3 minutes, but it's just topics around curriculum and scheduling that have become too frequent topics at cocktail parties with friends and things that I think the board, I at least want to open the conversation with you guys about it. And relative to homework, at least at our school, it just hasn't happened. And I've talked to all the teachers about it. I personally have not looked at all the studies that show that maybe it doesn't benefit, there's not a real benefit for elementary students to have homework. But what we've seen, and this is fairly anecdotal evidence at this point, but just my own personal experience with my friends and my own kids, is it's building a habit of low expectations. And we're fortunate that we have good students. Both of our kids are, they're good kids, no behavioral issues. But they react different to expectations from teachers than they do from us. And so when they do have homework, they know it's not being graded. And it sets a low bar, and it's building poor habits that is hard for us to turn that ship without some help from the district to maybe change that at the schools. I have a lot more thoughts on that, but I do see that it's building bad habits in my students that are good students, and I'm afraid that's probably filtering down across the board. Our teacher has issued homework because we asked her to, but she doesn't have time to grade it. She's inundated by other issues in the classroom where she's got, I think, 33 or 32 kids in the classroom. Most of her attention and her help goes towards behavioral issues and things like that, and the good students are just kind of skating by, and they're learning they can skate by, and it's starting to become scary for me as a parent. The last thing real quick is just days off, and this dovetails well with your guys' conversation that's going to start on potentially changing school hours and things, but it seems like every 3-day weekend has become a 4-day weekend. We've added 2 days to the front end of spring break. I think we're adding a day to Thanksgiving break, and in addition to my concern about time in the classroom for the students, it's also a huge burden for working parents to have all this time off of school when you have a 3-day weekend be a 4-day weekend, and the extra time with spring break. So as you talk about where we go with scheduling, I want that to be a part of the conversation as well. And thanks for your time and your service. And Elena, you rock. Nice work. Off to a soccer game. Thank you.
Hey, Troy, we might hit you up. We're going to have a committee to talk about our calendar. Because well, I have your email now, so now I know how to find you. We'll send you some information. Thanks for coming. Okay, last up here is Kirsten Pomerantz. Why can't I say it? Good evening.
Good evening, Superintendent, trustees. There we go. So my friends are here with me today to thank the district. The district recently sent 12 additional staff to become practitioners of trust-based relational intervention, TBRI. TBRI is an attachment-based, trauma-informed intervention that is designed to meet the complex needs of vulnerable children. Practitioners can train caregivers to provide effective support for at-risk children. This training included teachers from gen ed classrooms, K-12, special education teachers, counselors, and administrators. We spent an intensive week completing a couple months of individual study. We brought these ideas and practices right back to our schools and classrooms and homes. Coeur d'Alene was very represented in this international training group. We had between 25 and 30 people from Coeur d'Alene representing all sorts of agencies. We want to particularly thank Amy Fine for organizing this, Trina Cottle for supporting this, and Kelly Aiken for getting these ideas rolling a few years ago. We are looking forward to sharing these ideas across the district. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. I think Ms. Pickford actually partook in some of that training, not the practitioner training.
But it is amazing, and I too was super excited to see different agencies in Coeur d'Alene coming together there. We had, Children's Village and CASA and the school district and gosh, I can't think of the, where they go. Head Start and like when they get in trouble. Juvenile detention, thank you. All in a room together, all focusing on TBRI, and we too looked at a couple studies, and it's just fascinating. I've been online. There's so much stuff since that I too myself have, because you can apply it to in your own home as well. So I'm excited. I'm happy to hear more practitioners here in our district, and that's amazing. So awesome.
Okay, so that'll close up public comment, and we are on to our consent agenda. Is there a motion to approve tonight's consent agenda, items A through L?
So moved.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded. Any discussion? Okay, all in favor? Aye. Aye. Did you want to say something? Okay, all right. Okay. Okay, any opposed? Motion carries. All right. We are on to our finance items. Good evening, Ms. Ebner.
Okay. Good evening. I'm just going to get going on this update. We've been working through our subcommittee meetings. We've had 2 of those meetings, and oh, that might not be it. There we go. Yeah, it is. Found the presentation. All right, so we've had 2 of our budget subcommittee meetings, and just an overview of who's at the table. We have our superintendent, 2 board members,
representatives from the CEA, 2 community members. We were able to find a parent from Skyway and a parent from Canfield, school principal, and various district level directors. And this, the goal is to gather a number of district stakeholders. We, of course, can't get a representative from every group of district stakeholders, but we want to gather input for the methods we use to budget, as well as project some of our key variables, kind of the big revenue earners in our budget, and expenditure items that we have discretion over. And we also, it's one of the main goal, or the main things to do when we're, soliciting for input on the budget, is we need to explain how the budget's built. So we spend a lot of time talking about different formulas and how it's all calculated. So the first meeting we had, we discussed our beginning fund balance, and that's a piece that's important in our budget, because if there's a surplus or a deficit, that needs to be worked into the budget in subsequent years, unless it's a one-time budget or surplus. And that's kind of the philosophical discussion we had, is if it's one time or ongoing, you deal with it in different ways. And it's really important when we end the year, if we have a surplus or a deficit, to identify that and then communicate it out to the budget stakeholders. So that's one thing that we just kind of have to assume when we're building the budget, because we don't have that number until our audit is finished, which is late October. And so for this budget subcommittee, administration recommended that we budget with a flat beginning fund balance. And then if there were any significant changes to that, it would be communicated to the board and the CEA as well. So our next meeting was to discuss district revenues. We shared projections for our state special payments. Those are our strings attached payments that pay for a variety of programs like curriculum. Gifted and Talented is one of them. And then we talked about our salary-based apportionment, which is 52% of our general fund revenue. So that's a big piece of the pie, and it's a very complicated formula, lots of variables that are based on basically whether or not which students show up every single day. That can change the formula, as well as which staff we have as of October, the beginning of October. We also discussed how the state calculates what are called support units. That's a term that the state funds us based on numbers of students, like a packet of students that could make up a classroom, and whether or not they attend. So without getting too far into the weeds on that, we looked at some budgeting trends, support unit trends, because that was one of the main tasks of the budget subcommittee meeting for revenues, was to come away with a feeling that the committee was giving input on how many support units to budget for. And so we looked at, this is an example of from 2013 to 2018 or 2019, our first reporting period support units, and we kind of look at that best fit line in there, and it's an increase of 2.9 units per year. So we also looked at another method to calculate or to project support units, which was taking our enrollment for historical enrollment, and then calculating a possible total possible support units, and then comparing our actual to that total possible and finding a rate of variance, taking our projected enrollment and then applying that same rate of variance, which got us to a increase of 1.92 units. Did I miss that slide? I was going the wrong way. And so 1.92 units was where we sort of landed. It's a little more conservative than that best fit line. And of course, if you look at that, we don't want to be in one of those years where it's not really following that line. So 1.92 units was where we landed, and the general kind of discussion and consensus with the subcommittee was that that would be reasonable. So our next meeting is this Wednesday, May 8th. We're going to talk about changes to district expenditures. We're going to really be in the weeds for this meeting. We're also going to gather input on some budget prioritization as far as what's left after all of our have-to costs. And then next steps after that, we will have a budget workshop with the Board of Trustees. All of this information will be shared, all the input and discussion will be kind of summarized, and then the Board of Trustees will make the final decisions on the budget support units, other revenue projections, as well as expenditure additions. Any questions?
Any questions for Ms. Ebner? I see none. Thank you. Okay. And then the finance report was in the packet. Just a reminder, because we're doing a little different. So we're getting these kind of detailed finance snapshots from Ms. Ebner, so she's hitting a different topic each month, and we're not looking at the or going over in detail the numbers in the meetings. Those are in our board packet, and they're in the public board packet as well for the public to look at. Okay. Next up, we're into action items. And Dr. Cook, this first one I think is you here to start. And that's item C, an administrative resolution.
Yeah, so at the last board meeting, we had a discussion in which we proposed the idea of digging into whether or not investigating later start times for our secondary schools was a plausible task for us to undertake. And so we had lots of conversation about this as district administration. And one of the considerations we felt like was that whether or not this was going to be something that, if the board was entertaining the willingness to dig into that, was to make sure that we looked at all factors. And that meant kind of this discussion that got deeper and deeper as we went. And so what you see in this resolution is the result of administrative kind of milling about and digging around in all the things that could potentially be impacted by looking into it. And likewise, some of the issues that would be a consideration. And so this resolution is for your guys' consumption. I'd like to take just a minute to draw attention to the major points of it. Just if you'll entertain me for the opportunity to just read this, I think it's important that we get this on the record. Resolution of the Board of Education of Coeur d'Alene School District Number 271, exploration of late start for secondary schools and other impacted areas. Whereas the Coeur d'Alene School District is responsible for providing suitable and equitable education programming to all students, and whereas the district is in the process of setting the new strategic plan for the next 5 years, including defining the profile of a graduate and establishing goals and expectations for all CdA graduates, and whereas the Coeur d'Alene School District has just undertaken 2 major audits to ascertain the current state of the system with the intent to maximize performance and efficiency to ultimately provide the highest quality educational opportunities for all CdA students. Whereas the district will undergo a boundary rezoning in the 2019-20 school year to accommodate a new elementary school opening in 2020-2021, and will be shifting staff between schools once the new school is opened and the new boundaries are modified across the district. And whereas there currently exists significant inequities in access to electives and instructional time between our 2 comprehensive high schools, Lake City High School and Coeur d'Alene High School, currently function under different daily start times, different bell schedules, different graduation requirements, different course offerings, different total hours of instruction per course, and different total hours of instruction overall annually. And whereas the research behind later start times for secondary students provides compelling evidence that adolescents and teens could benefit from later start times for secondary schools, and whereas changing secondary start times creates issues that impact many and have implications that must be considered, including but not limited to the impact on local community workforce, young students at early bus stops, after-school care for K-5 students due to earlier K-5 release, impact on extracurricular activities, transportation, school plus, Kinder Plus and nutrition services, potential loss of instructional time for students participating in athletics, and impact on work schedules for parents and students. Now therefore be it resolved, the board directs the superintendent to present information, data, and likely impact thereof, including recommendations to the board regarding changes in the start times in both elementary and secondary schools, changes in attendance boundaries for all schools, including recommendations to the board for potential common bell schedules for both comprehensive high schools with common graduation requirements, daily schedules, and the ability to share staff and resources between the high schools. The superintendent shall ensure that the following conditions are met. An ad hoc committee on secondary start times be convened to guide that part of this work. The staff membership of this committee shall include staff from elementary, middle, and high schools. An administrative committee will be convened to work on the common schedule and common graduation requirements for the 2 comprehensive high schools, with consideration of Venture High School as well. The recommendations shall include plans for implementation for the 2020-2021 school year and beyond. The information and recommendations shall be presented to the board for potential implementation for the 2020-2021 school year to coincide with the new boundaries created by the opening of the new elementary school.
Okay, thank you for reading that. I'm glad I didn't have to. It's like first grade terror all over again. Didn't we talk about this? It's like one of those triggers that everyone remembers about having to read aloud. Before we discuss on this, Dr. Cook, I just want to clarify a couple things and make sure I'm on the same page here. And that's just with a couple of bullets you had at the end there on page 2. So the ad hoc committee, you had a note in there as far as staff makeup, but that would fall under, I think it's policy 1250. It would be a board subcommittee. And so the membership would, in kind of the formation of that committee, would fall under those guidelines. Is that right?
Yeah, that's correct.
And so it'll be a mix of staff members and community members, correct?
Yeah, that I would recommend that we use the ad hoc approach for this particular work. But as far as the staffing goes, I think it would be important to get representation from all 3 levels as far as those that would be impacted by it, including meeting all the expectations outlined in the policy with regards to community members, et cetera.
Okay. And then on bullet point 2 there, the administrative committee, that would be kind of your subgroup working for the superintendent that would be looking at those items listed there.
Yeah, we would make a recommendation that we convene a committee that would just dig into this and just kind of find out what would this look like potentially and bring a report back to us, and then we would potentially bring that report to the board for consideration once that work is developed. And I think that the idea is a little bit here to use an overused metaphor is that this is talking about later start times is a disruption to the community. It takes a lot of conversation, and we would recommend that if you're going to do that much, which is there's a lot of passion and energy around this that could potentially wind up on both sides, it would be important to do all the things that happen that could be potentially aligned with that. So that kind of rip off the Band-Aid and have this conversation. Now, whether or not recommendations for changing school schedules, that would be left for that committee to determine through the work and the conversation, which would include potentially impacting that conversation about later starts too.
Okay, and then just my final question, at least for now, on this is as far as timing. Do you have something in mind as far as when a recommendation or when additional information would come back to the board? And I'm just trying to think, the 2020-2021 school year is 18, 19 months away from current where we sit today. We're talking about some potential monumental shifts here in boundaries, in schedules, in class offerings, in start times, all those sorts of things, that if there were changes to any one of those things, let alone multiples of those, we would need to give our community and our parents as much forewarning on that and opportunity to comment on those sorts of things. So I'm trying to figure out when are we going to have this work done? I know, for instance, with school start times, several districts, when they've looked at this and they've done this, they've kind of done it with a 2-year warning.
Right.
Like, okay, we're going to start this in 2 years, or something like that. And so we're under 2 years already. And there's some big shifts there. I appreciate that we're looking at all those other items, because I think there's just great conversation to be had around that, the differences between our two high schools. But
Yeah, I think the conversations need to start. I would challenge that it could be done as soon as to start for the 2020. There's a lot of 20s. 2020, 2021 school year. 2021 school year. Boy, that's a lot. I'm not sure it could be done sooner. I think it's a doable, but it's optimistically doable. I would suggest that we don't try to do it any sooner than that. This is a pretty heavy lift. And I think that if we do take this on to try and coincide with rebounding, which is, that's going to be handled. That has to be, assuming all things work out, that has to be ready to go next fall, not this fall of the 19 school year, but the fall of 20. If it is doable, it would be best to try and align with that. But that, you're right, that's an optimistic time frame. And if not, if we can't do it, then the obvious recommendation would be to start the following year if there were changes outside of the rebounding.
Next questions. I just had a question on I think it's the number 1, 2, 3, 4, and it's mostly under, so we're all using the same terminology. We did a lot of reboundaries, we have new district boundaries, and I wonder if that could be confusing for some families. We're really redoing attendance zones, or that's what we referred to them in the past, so maybe we could come to agreement. However it reads, if someone, I'm just afraid someone might be concerned that we're actually changing zones this year. We're doing a study of rezoning in the 2019-2020 school year. Do you see where it reads? Whereas the district will undergo a boundary rezoning in the 2019-2020 school year to accommodate a new elementary school. And then it goes on to say the new school is opened and the new boundaries are modified across the district. So I'm wondering if we want to refer to that as attendance zones, or because our district boundaries are set. We just did all that work 2 years ago as far as work with Post Falls. So just so everybody's on the same page.
I would maybe make 2 suggestions there. I think the one would be that, so it'd say, whereas the district will undergo a attendance rezoning study in the 2019-2020, because that's what you're going to do, right? You're going to study it this year or next school year.
This school year, starting this fall.
Right. And then, that we just change those boundary to attendance zone.
Sure. Maybe friendly amendment?
And the study part, I think, is important, so no parent would think, oh my gosh, we're getting new boundary rezoning in this school year. No one's changing any attendance zones. The 2019-2020 school year, it won't be until the 2020.
Gotcha. Yeah.
Just so we don't get any alarmed parents calling the district.
No, absolutely.
My only concern is kind of following up with what Casey said as far as when the time frame and all this. I see this as a huge push. We've heard from Dr. Morrow multiple times, and the research is pretty clear that there's some evidence that later start times is helpful to adolescents. But I also know this is a huge change, and you do include this in your resolution, for lots of people in the community in lots of different levels, different ways. So I guess my concern was really when the report would be due, and then I would kind of agree that having it for the fall of 2020 might be a little difficult to do. The last time this issue came up, there was an article in the press, and I went and read the online comments, and there were over 200 comments, and majority of them were pretty negative. So I think wherever we do, we have to do a lot of community education. We have to not only figure out the details about how this would be done, but then we really have to get the community along with us. And if they're not along with us, if they're not with us on this issue, then we can't do it. I mean, it's just too big of a change. So I'm just thinking that possibly the 2020 school year, 2021 might be a little difficult if you include all the public education that needs to take place.
the same comment. Well, my first response, and I asked the question, are we really taking on, the block schedule versus the regular schedule, and is that part of this whole thing? And I thought, wow, we're biting off a lot. But having processed it and thought about it and getting the answer to that, I think, okay. But I do want a time frame, and my suggestion, albeit maybe lofty, would be that the last sentence of the resolution would indicate a specific month that the board would have it presented to them. And I would like to see it be November of 2019, because that would give us the ability to vote and process that and maybe roll it out for the start of the 2020 school year as, educating and what we're going to do, and it gives us 9 months to do that. Those are my thoughts.
Before you comment, I'll comment on that too. I had the same thought that I'd like to see a time frame, at least with attendance zone changes. Because we went through this a few years ago. We shifted a few elementary zones with the opening of Nexa and the annexation of the West Landings. And then we moved some Woodland and Lakes boundaries, attendance zones a little bit. So if I remember right, we did that like in May, I think, before the board took action. It took several months, like 3 or 4 months, a bunch of public hearings, just after the recommendation came to the board. And I think we ended up doing some tweaking from what was originally recommended. So my thought would be, like, I think March. We were really late at that point. Basically, we were almost when school was out. I think before people were actually notified. I think when the board took action and people were notified, they had registered already and all those sorts of things. So at least for the attendance zones, I'd like to see it by March as action item. Yes. But and I know what you were. Right.
If we wanted to parse it out, I'm fine with that too, and have some individual targets for the two areas. There's 3, I guess. Start times, the difference between the 2 high schools, and then your attendance zones.
I think separating them is going to be integrally important, but I think even in the resolution, we need to get whoever's going to help us with the attendance zones going. And I think long-range planning's been kind of working on that, and they would like to help with that process. But if they're ready to go, early end of August, early September, I think March is probably the most realistic time by whoever comes in and does their evaluation, gets out in the community. March of 2020 seems like that's the first piece of this puzzle, is getting the attendance zones sorted out. But it seems like some of the interim work can be done, like busing and, or correct me if I'm wrong, but they could do the preliminary work as far as what it would take to adapt the busing schedule. We can do some surveying of the community. The basic pieces can be done in that time frame while we're waiting for official attendance zone report to come in. Does that seem reasonable? Or?
Yeah, I think so. I think you can walk alongside that work with a lot of the other work, but there has to be some, it comes in phases, and I think that's the part that we could do. The idea that when a final recommendation, if, for example, we had a final recommendation for zones done in March, we would probably need a little bit of time after that to even tidy up some of the expectations with regards to, we'd be working up until the very start of school with regards to bus routes and that kind of stuff and what transportation commitments we'd be making. But we would have general guiding expectations pretty soon thereafter. We don't have attendance zones in here other than, there's mention of it, but not really talk of how that work would be done. Do you want to maybe just give us an idea of what your thoughts would be? This would kind of be on you to come to a recommendation with us. Yeah, our intent, we're all on the same page. Absolutely. Our intent would be to come to you with a recommendation for somebody to come in and perform a zone analysis for the district and look at population trends in the district and look and see where we need to be preparing for, so that it's not a reactive and emotional rezoning, but you're actually rezoning based upon what the progression of the district looks like in the next near future, with the intent of including any future build that the board and long-range planning would recommend to meet the growth needs of the district. And so we've got an RFP in mind to go out for that here pretty quick. And we anticipate that we could have that work done in a reasonable amount of time and be ready to present to you. That would be, our recommendation would be to have somebody to come in and really focuses on the demographic aspect of it, referencing that time frame.
I think it might be nice to share with the board too. We got a couple examples at the long-range planning agenda meeting of work that's been done locally. Central Valley did the same kind of work, and it might give, I think, the board an idea of how in-depth this information can be and how much it can help you as far as land acquisition. So maybe we can forward on to the rest of the board the couple examples that we had, so they have an idea of what we're really hoping for and the direction that it will hopefully give us.
Yeah, I think it's important to note, Katie, you might have heard her mention that we're using projection data to determine how we calculate our budget, because it's based upon you're projecting the number of kids that show and then whether or not they're going to attend classes. And we're making decisions based upon that information, and that information is only as good as the system that is used to predict it. And we also look backwards to see how well they've predicted in retrospect or in hindsight, and it's been useful material, and we've gotten actually great results by using that data to make these decisions. And so we've been providing that to long-range planning as a tool for projections and helping inform what decisions we need to make with regards to buildings and growth, and now budget too. So I think that is an ongoing perspective that the board needs to have and consider with regards to what does it look like when you plan for growth, development, and zoning and all those decisions.
Thank you. The reason I asked that question, I think the last time we did this, when I spoke about that a few years ago, it was kind of a local committee with representatives from each school, and it was, in my opinion, as a board member who didn't sit on the committee, but it was just very emotionally charged. It tended to be the schools with the louder voices tended to get their way more than the schools that didn't have the same representation. And so I appreciate that we're going to go to a little more data driven model, and that's why I just asked the question to make sure we're all on the same page on that.
I was wondering that as well, because I sat in on that committee, and we held a few forums to get the information out of these changes, and the people that would show up were the people on the committee and the schools being affected. So this will be nice. And we had maps, and they tried to send out notifications to any family that would be affected to get people there, and it wasn't until after. I felt it was pretty smooth, but we did get a few emails like in shock about the changes, and I just thought, well, how did we not reach these? But maybe we did reach them. So I love to hear that we're going to go that route, and then it would be getting the information out to all our families. Yeah.
Okay, so we had a modification that Ms. May suggested there, and Ms. Brumley brought up the idea of putting a deadline in here. Dr. Cook, do you just want to respond to that part of it, because you didn't get a chance? I saw you. I saw the sweat, beating down your head when she said November.
The collar of my shirt got really tight. I think the challenge is and if you recall, I think Trustee Hearn said right before you said that it's really important to get everybody's voices, and I think there's three things that in essence have to happen. We've got to go survey the community, and I don't just mean survey electronically. I mean actually go out and have committee meetings and talk to folks and find out what their expectations are and what they want for their kids. The second thing is we've got to make a decision based upon that information. And the third thing is we've got to give the schools enough time to get prepared for those decisions, whatever that happens. And each one of those has its own lifespan. And I think what I would recommend, rather than have a drop dead date of when we bring this back, is having regular updates on progression, on what this might be and how it's going. Because I think one of the things, it's highly engaging, highly emotional work, even if you hire parts of it to be done from external sources that use data to make those decisions. It does not reduce the emotion, and you've got to process, the community has to process those discussions. And I think that's hard to predict how long some of that might take, and I think it's very realistic to recognize that we're recommending change, whatever decision we make in any of those things. Potentially, it's possible that the committees could come back and say, nope, we think the high schools are doing just fine as they are. We're not changing start times. We're not changing anything. But I think the likelihood of that change, that the only thing that changes in the next 15 to 18 months are zones, is not likely. I think there's a very real possibility that there are going to be recommendations coming out of committees that are going to be significant. And I just want to make sure that we are mindful of the time for implementation to do it well. And whether that's November or March, I think I do think it's important that we constantly bring people back to you and have those reports, but putting an end on it, I think could set a sense of urgency that doesn't have to exist.
Can I,
Go ahead.
One last comment. And it was to Mr. Hearn's comment about Facebook and how there was over 200 comments in a very short time on a very vague article about that we might talk about late start times. And I think I look at the second to last whereas, and it says the research behind late start times for secondary students provides compelling evidence that adolescents and teens could benefit from later start times for secondary schools. And I would hope that this committee, when they're doing their work and we're processing information, that we're thinking about what is in the best interest of our adolescents and our teens. And I think it's an emotionally charged issue, but a lot of the comments were, I walk to school in the snow and I'm fine, and we're not remembering that we've evolved as a community, a society, and we are starting schools earlier and earlier, and it was different back then. And so if we could, when we're clarifying who's going to serve on our committee, if we could add a position and we have representation from either Panhandle, Heritage, Kootenai Health, somebody with some experience in adolescent health, so we're getting that objective advice, and it's not someone saying, I walked to school, or I went to school at 6 o'clock in the morning, I did 0 hour and I'm fine, that we're getting data and we can parse out the two and we can interpret it. But I think some representation from a professional, a mental health professional, whoever it may be, sitting on that committee, helping both sides understand that we're not debating research, we're debating what's in the best interest of our students.
Yeah, and that's the difficult part of this. We've done some preliminary kind of digging into it, and there's compelling evidence for a lot of things, and it's about all students, right? And I think that's the early part of this conversation is the research is pretty solid, right? That students would benefit from it. But equally, I think important is that potentially we could have 5,000 to 6,000 K-5 students out of school at 2:30 in the afternoon if we change nothing but just flip the schedules. So where do those kids go? Does the community have the resource to address that demand just in the community? I mean, I think that's part of the question is years ago, I was a latchkey kid in second grade, and I walked home as a second grader, and that's not today. That's just a different world. And I think that's part of the conversation. And it's not that, I don't say that because I'm for or against anything. I say that because both of those situations are real, that we would have to be willing to consider.
You walked home uphill both ways, right?
Yeah.
I just
He lived in Kansas. It was very flat.
No, I just want to make the point. It wasn't that I disagree with the science, of course. That was my, mental health was my background. I worked in it. I'm just talking about moving the community along. This is not an easy process. We're talking about a major change affecting multiple systems. And that's why I say we have to give ourselves plenty of time for education if we decide to go this route. And I think that's still a big if. There may be enough pushback or other reasons not to do it. So anyway, anyway, that's enough, I guess. Thank you.
I jotted down an idea here as we were talking, and this is what I wrote. Thinking it could be added at the end where Ms. Brumley suggested November. Any committee recommendations would be presented to the board at least 6 months prior to the proposed implementation. And so that gives us some leeway. So we may be, 1 year you may say, okay, we're proposing, we're going to have to do some attendance zone shifts, right? Because we're going to have an elementary school opening up for the 2020-2021 school year. So at the very least, we know that's coming. Right. Maybe you're looking at bell schedules and that sort of thing at the 2 high schools. Maybe we're not ready for that at that time, and maybe it's the following year. I guess my idea is that gives us some flexibility there, that this could be tiered. Like maybe some things may happen for 2021 and some things might not happen until 21-22, but it gives the intent, hey, don't spring this on us in June.
You worry though if we say 6 months, it's so specific that what if we're 4 months and 3 days? I think we could say in a timely fashion, or maybe not being so specific that it limits, because this is something that needs to be done, I would say, as the school year starts. Wouldn't that be correct, Dr. Cook? That you could do it mid-year potentially would be.
Yeah, so your point is well taken. But even 6 months and is, it's not unheard of to start talking about the next year in a high school in November. It's not unheard of, right? You start doing things like building the handbook, the course book. Thank you. As early as November and December, right? Like courses that are going to be proposed to be offered. And so when we talk about things like if we're going to change graduation requirements, that's an extensive conversation, or if we're just going to say, for example, we need to talk about what graduation requirements would look like in a different schedule, or should we just talk about graduation requirements first and then build a schedule that helps students meet those things? I mean, those are 3 different approaches, right? And 6 months would put us February, March, right, for start date for, and I would suppose as a high school principal, hearing something after March would be a little bit startling about for the next year. And so by March, you've got at least a draft ready to go for the master schedule for where people are teaching in your building for the hundreds of classes you're offering. You may not have a final version of it, but you've already started working it out. And so they're going to need some time and opportunity. So the 6-month window doesn't actually necessarily scare me. And I think that we would owe that to our building administrators to be able to give them the ability to do this implementation well, as we would, just as my shirt collar got a little tight when I heard that amount of time to get there, they would feel the same tightness about, okay, here's the decision. You now have 4.5 months to go make it be. We wouldn't want to do that to them as well. So I'm not opposed to the idea of giving them a runway to get this implemented effectively.
Well, the only thing I don't like about it is that this resolution says for implementation for the 2021. The amendment would essentially mean that it may not be in the 2021. My preference is to keep the language. I think it should be the 6 month as part of this language, and if it's not doable, then we are updated on that, and we can always notify and make a change if we can't get enough community input, or I get it's a lot, we're biting off a lot here, and that's why my initial reaction was I want to focus just on the one issue. But if we're going to take all 3 on, I still have a high expectation of having a target date that's going to get met, and then what happens in the process dictates a change, not the opposite of we'll update you on the process and decide when the end is there. I'd like to have the end set out.
Do you have a suggested change?
Yeah, so we'd be open to suggested terminology change that you'd like us to modify that.
So on that last sentence, I had my initial suggestion was the information and recommendation shall be presented to the board in the November board meeting for the potential implementation of the 2021. If we're not gonna go with that date, then we can, yeah. Well, February or March would be stuck into that, and then we would continue to get updates, and if we need to make it known that that March date for, say, obviously the attendance zoning is gonna happen, but if we needed to reevaluate that for high school graduation and bell schedules in terms of the matching and their scheduling, fine. Or if we needed to retool that for start times, fine. But I'd really like something set out as the goal, and then based on the progress that can be made, we would adapt.
I see one other issue that's difficult is our ad hoc committees don't get going until September. We haven't advertised for this one yet, and so getting a committee up and running and getting a full report, that only limits them, or that limits them to potentially 3 meetings maybe. September, if they're lucky, so October, November, December's tough. I think it's compacted, I guess that's what I'm saying. And so even looking at before March to get a true litmus test of the community about their feelings seems, I mean, do you think a committee could get that much work done?
Well, I don't think there's anything that prohibits the committee from starting sooner. You know, I know 1 year for long-range planning when I was on that committee, we started early, and we met often, but much more than what their bylaws state. That was the year CSG did their work. You know, maybe a little harder staff-wise if we were going through the summer, depending the makeup of the staff. But I think there's going to be enough interest that people are going to want to be a part of it. So I think if we, like Ms. Brumley's suggestion on that last sentence there, I would say after the information and recommendations shall be presented to the board, and we insert by the March board meeting or the February board meeting, I guess. No, there'll be more. Personally, I'm okay with March. I think that's maybe more realistic for some of these. And I think it gives us enough time based on how we did attendance zones last time. Like I said, I think we were into May when we did those, and it was too late, for sure. I mean, ideally, I think Meade just did a bunch of these, and they put them out there a full year in advance on attendance zone changes. But I'd be okay with inserting March there. Okay. 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 All right.
Can you, Ms. Town, can you just read that into the record as it was stated?
Well, I do have the change on the first page and changing the from a boundary rezoning to an attendant zone study. In the final paragraph, the information and recommendation shall be presented to the board in March of 2020 for the potential implementation for the 2020-2021 school year to coincide with the new boundaries created by the opening of the new elementary school.
Change that boundaries also.
And I'll change the word boundaries. Anywhere it's noted, I'll make the change.
Okay. I'm good with that. Okay. All right. So no, we don't need to reread it. Please. Is there a motion to approve the resolution as amended? As revised? Okay, it's been moved and seconded. Any further discussion? Okay, all in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Okay, motion carries. All right, next up is policy for action, and we have a number of them here. And most of these, I believe, with the exception of a few we saw last month, they were for information. There's a few of them that were marked in red. Is that correct, Ms. Town? That are legal changes. And so because we don't have a choice in that matter, they just come to us for action. We have to approve them because of a law change or a tweak in language there. So we saw these last month. We had a few comments there, really just on the new DDRC subcommittee, the Discipline Review Committee. And it looks like those were implemented. They were in blue in your packet. So there was a few changes, I think, swapping a couple bullets, the order on those. Any comments, questions, concerns on these?
I have a quick question. On 3340P, the superintendent will provide the board with an annual suspension report. Do we do that, or is that necessary, or is it added, new? I know we get an update in our board packet, but I don't recall an annual suspension report.
So I think we added that to our monthlies, how we
chose, the requirement is to provide it annually to the board. A few years ago, we chose to provide that on the monthly basis.
Should we change it? The superintendent will provide the board with a monthly suspension report, or does it not matter?
No, because the statute says annual, and then it's up to us to choose our timeline. We talked about doing it quarterly or semester. We ended up going with monthly.
Anything else? I'm just going to find, I had a couple edits last month that I'm just going to mention so I don't forget.
Wait, that's the one I thought of.
Go ahead.
The one I thought was about the DDRC, that they cannot have repeated or hearings, and we didn't clarify it was a time. So I was just wondering if we needed to clarify that time frame. It said cannot have multiple, or, geez, is it number 7? What page?
Where are you at?
10.
What policy are we on?
Oh, yes. Number 7, the same policy, 3340P, and on page 10. And number 7, it says, is it number 7, DDRC hearings for repeat offenders? And then, it says the exception to this rule is, if extended time has passed since the initial DDRC. And I thought that could be.
What policy is that? I guess they're.
Oh, 3340?
3340P-2.
Number 7.
P-3.
Or P-3.
P.
Yeah.
3340 P-3, I think.
Mm-hmm.
Page 3.
Repeat offenders, I found it.
Found it? So it's the last sentence, and I just wonder if we need clarification on the last sentence. Yeah, the exception to this rule, if extended time has passed since the initial DDRC, and I thought extended time seemed vague and could be widely interpreted. So do we need to say greater than 3 months, greater than 6 months? I wasn't sure what the process intended, and Trina might have an idea on what extended. Is that a year, calendar school year?
The intent of this is that essentially is to limit repeat offenses, right? You're not gonna go ahead of DDRC, but if something happened, for example, in 8th grade, and then a similar kind of action happened again their junior year, that would be an extended period of time. So you're separating that, and I think the intention is to give building administrators time to say, look, it's not about recidivism. It's that situation was isolated. It was way back when. I think the idea is if this happened in November and then again in April, then you're not going to go to DDRC. You're going to go for an expulsion.
Right. I gather that's what the interpretation was. I just wondered if you had two principals who interpreted it differently. You could have some kids who are going back to the DDRC and some who are going for expulsion hearing. And so maybe just some clarification so every student's treated the same, I guess. And we could say greater than 1 year or the school year when we do our expulsions on the school year often, or just some clarification generally so one person isn't widely interpreting it different.
If the board's interested in that.
Is there a benefit to leaving it vague? Because I see both sides. I see the benefit of the more vague aspect of it is it allows for more inclusion. I understand Trustee May's position though, in that there needs to be that equity and fairness. And so would you end up with an inequity if you aren't, if the DDRC isn't interpreting it the same for all kids?
Remember that the DDRC is primarily used as a is this the best? It's a due process. It's part of the due process hearing, but it's also does every kid that violates a policy need to go before the board for an expulsion hearing? So the function of the DDRC is to build this district committee of folks that can listen with intention on what this particular discipline scenario is. And so if a kid had a repeat offense that was on what we six would define as that's on the verge of the extended time definition, the kid benefiting from going back in front of the DDRC would not be gaining a tremendous asset by doing so. And I think that leaving it vague in this sense makes that more user-friendly for the committee to use, because if it's a weapons or something serious, that it's going to be irrelevant anyway. And so it's no more vague, if you will, than the authority that a building administrator has with regards to how they are going to make those recommendations with regards to discipline referrals as they go. There comes a point where on repeat offenses, a similar kinds of offense done for the umpteenth time could wind you up in front of this an expulsion hearing. So it's a similar kind of nature. That discretion already exists with the building administrators, and so we're not necessarily limiting anything that they don't already have.
I wasn't necessarily worried that it was going to be used inappropriately. I just thought since the DDRC, it moves, it's not a assigned committee that stays the same for every student. So I just thought with the flexibility and it could be interpreted, and if it ended up being an issue where one student didn't receive the same leniency or vice versa, it could be difficult. So I didn't know if you thought it needed clarification. If you're comfortable with it, that's fine. I just, in my mind, I thought, this is something new, and there'll be different interpretation of this policy and procedure. And to me, for that piece of it, it seemed a little bit vague. I had one other quick question, and Trina might be able to answer this question. Is there any potential that a student who goes before the DDRC and, for whatever reason, there's no consensus made, and it gets appeals to the superintendent, and then it gets appealed to the board, do we worry that they'll be out of school longer because of this process, or would that instance be so rare that we wouldn't have to worry we're keeping kids out already on a...
So one of the intentions on this is ultimately to speed up the process. And so it will force our hand a little bit to try to turn those things around quicker. We're still bound by the same limitations of time as we've always been, and this will not change that.
I'm going to hold kind of my just grammar edits that I have here, but I had one on 3340P-4. That's not really a grammar. It would be on point 1 there under expulsions. In the third sentence, and Ms. Town, this is probably for you, but in the third sentence it says it's talking about notice, and that'll be sent by registered or certified mail at least 5 school days before the date of the scheduled hearing. And I was wondering if that should be business days. I know we've had a hearing in the summer, I believe, and so obviously if it were 5 school days, that doesn't work out in the summertime. So.
Business days.
So also in 2?
Well, I just caught it in the one spot, but.
Well, they have to be calendar days. Can it be business days?
I think you'd want to do business days because you're sending it certified mail, and so the mail's not going to move on calendar days, right? But
Required which days we.
Yeah, we may need to check statute to see if that's in there, but it seems like it ties our hands a little bit if it's school days potentially. Okay. Any other questions, comments, concerns on these policies? Okay. Is there a motion to approve the policies as as revised? Okay, it's been moved and seconded. Any further discussion? Ms. Town, are we clear on the revisions? Okay.
Yeah, thank you. I think it seems like an amazing policy, and I think it'll benefit our students.
We're excited. Okay, all in favor? Aye, any opposed? Okay. All right, we're into information items. We are, look at that, about 20 minutes ahead of schedule. We're doing good. It's hot in here. Dr. Cook, Dr. Cook, I might be.
So,
Go ahead.
As you all know, we currently are under agreement with the city public library system and have a great partnership with them as we are sharing space at Lake City High School. And I think that's been in place now for 3 years, I believe. And I would like to present to you Betty Amon, who is here to talk about potential partnership with the new school located on Prairie Avenue.
Salutations. Good evening, Mr. Chairman, members of the board, esteemed architect friend, Dr. Cook. Thank you for letting me give you this quick presentation about a proposal to include public library space in the new school that you've been talking about at length. And I guess I have control here. All right. As Dr. Cook alluded to, we've had this great partnership going on since January 2016, and some of you were on the board when we proposed that. And I think it's a great success. We have a public library staff member there after school. And as Paul Sutton, the school librarian, said in his letter, it keeps the library open, kids get to stay, public library patrons get to come in and pick up their holds and have questions answered and so forth. So, and I think something that's interesting too is that there's a new school being proposed in Post Falls, and the public library that serves Post Falls has been looking hard at this model and hoping to maybe have that school library incorporate public library services in an area of town that's quickly growing. The idea being that kids could ride their bikes or walk on a trail and get to public library services without coming downtown. So I think that's terrific, a great compliment to you and to the public library for initiating this at Lake City. And Spokane Public Library is including a school community library in a school in Hilliard that they're building. So it's a great idea. We have a long-range plan too. It's probably not nearly as extensive as yours, but one of our goals is to provide community members with increased access to materials and services. And I know you've been planning and talking about the school for years, and so have we. We've been eyeballing it, and I've been annoying Dr. Cook and sending letters to you, and I know Ann Smart's been talking to you, Mr. Chairman, about our idea. Kiki Miller, who's on Coeur d'Alene City Council, is the liaison to the library board, and she was an instigator in the Lake City project because she heard constituents say, you know, what about me out here? And so this is the logical next step. So here we are. Anna Wilson created the first PowerPoint that we did 3.5 years ago. And this was one of her slides. I liked it a lot. So we've explored this with you all. We're right now looking at the school plans, and Scott Fisher, who knows about libraries because he was our architect at the Coeur d'Alene Public Library. We're looking at library budgeting. I'm in my budget process asking for another staff member who can potentially run this branch library if all things go well. And if we can all agree on that, we'll have an MOU for both the city attorney and for your attorney to look at. So the advantages, you know what they are. Public library services, it's that social infrastructure that we know neighborhoods and growing areas need. Open all summer. I've always thought school libraries, they sit there in the summer with all those books. Nobody gets to use those books. I want them used. Promoting reading for students. One of the Library Foundation board members is Pam Pratt. She used to work for the school district. She immediately envisioned fifth graders doing computer training for senior citizens. What if? Can you imagine what a cool thing that would be in a school setting? And all those people who say, I don't have kids in school, so I shouldn't have to pay school taxes, they could see their tax dollars at work in a public library in their neighborhood school. What a deal. And pre-literacy, preschool literacy, you know, we're all into collaborating for that. We had our branch library in Skyway Elementary last summer. We moved from Lake City because of remodeling and construction, and so we had access to all that material that was in the school library. It worked out great. We did story times and great projects. So it's a good resource sharing activity. And I don't know if you're aware of all the wonderful things your public library provides for you. We have this news service. We're providing digital archives to the old Coeur d'Alene Press. So you can look on our resource page. If you wanted an obituary from 1919, you could type in the name of the person and get that obituary full text from the old newspaper. Those are things that we can bring to school situations and show kids how to use them. It's a wonderful service. Plus, we have a lot of databases that we can share. We already share, but we can teach people about, because we have a ton of stuff. All of us do, but we don't know about it, so we don't use it. So that would be terrific to do that. And that's how fast I am. So love to hear your questions, provide some interesting answers, and get my kazoo if I need to, stretch this out any longer.
Question. What hours would it be open in the summer, or Skyway, what hours did you guys?
Well, we modified Lake City's and Skyways in the summer because after school was silly. And in fact, the first year that we were at Lake City, we tried doing morning, afternoon, and evening, so that we thought, if people want to come after work, we should be open late in the afternoon, but maybe somebody wants to come to story time in the morning. It confused people totally. So last summer we just did, I think we did noon to 5 or noon to 4 days a week. And it was consistent. People could come. We could have Lego club. We could have story time. And if you were picking up your hold or dropping off your books to be returned to the main library, you knew what time somebody would be there.
So what you're looking at is proposing a new branch in the new school. So we have to, obviously, if we approve this, we have to work with the architects to make this work, because that's different. I'm not sure how big of a modification to the plan it would be, but some modification.
A good point, and we have been looking at it. That's kind of why I've been pushy at this point and before in the process. To have a public library in that building, you need an outside entrance, restroom availability, and parking, and a way to secure the school so when the library's open, so that there's not a worry about that. And Scott's worked with me, Dr. Cook's worked with me. We've looked at a couple different really slight modifications, and I've indicated that if there need to be any that are expensive, that are not included in your budget, that our library foundation's willing to do some fundraising specifically for that. So we want to partner all the way with this.
So we've actually gotten into this pretty early, and we've presented some questions to Scott, and we've gotten actually some pretty simple solutions that didn't necessarily entail additional costs by getting to it pretty quick and getting those modifications made. And so we're gonna leverage that. We're gonna ask for the library board to build a mezzanine level on top of the library.
No.
And see if they get, well, no. No, but right now, just by changing some door locations, flopping around a couple of design issues, we think we've resolved the bathroom access and external access and all those things with minimal impact to the plans and or to the district. How about you show it when we pull up later? Yeah.
He's next. We'll see that in a minute.
I just think it's a great idea. I've appreciated the partnership at Lake City. I supported this when it first came up a few years ago. So thank you for hanging in there with the district and proposing another site. I think it's great.
Oh, you're welcome. It's such a win-win deal for us, I think.
I have a question that I think I've shared with Dr. Cook, and I know I shared it with Ann Smart, just about access. And I remember this being an issue when we talked about Lake City High School, but there may be materials that are coming in for patrons of the library that families might not be interested in their student having access to. And so how would we separate that? Now we're talking with a younger audience as far as the school.
Right.
And I,
well,
to be quite honest, I can't remember how we handled that at Lake City.
Well, of course, it's a high school library, so your worries, weren't as great. But there still were people on the board who were worried about content and didn't want to offend anybody. School library kids can't check out public library materials unless they have a public library card, and so their parents would have agreed to them having access anyway. It's certainly not our intent to have provocative material in any library situation. We'd have a core collection there of materials for all ages. There'd be adult fiction and audiobooks and DVDs. And people could place holds on things that would be stored behind a desk because that's the way we do it at the public library. Holds are private. And so we wouldn't need to have a book on display that a person could put a hold on and get it the next day. So I think we would certainly be reasonable. It wouldn't be our intent to be provocative at all.
How do you envision, maybe this will give me a better understanding, I guess, how do you envision it would be laid out in, because we're talking with kind of a blank canvas of a library, so is there a row in that library or section in the library that has the public books in it?
That's how we do it at Lake City. And I haven't looked, at the plans to date, but that's what I would assume. We would have, and we wouldn't bring over as many books for elementary age kids because there would already be a core collection there. So we just would need shelving for young adult materials and audiobooks and so forth.
So are the collections then, they remain separate? So if a community member comes in, they can't check out the district's collection, and for students to check out your collection, they have to have their library card. Is that correct? So
right. Right. But what's worked out in a terrific way is public library patrons have been able to check out Lake City library books, which is terrific. I mean, no librarian wants a bunch of books sitting on a shelf and nobody reading them. We all want the books to be in a pile by somebody's bed or, next to the couch so that people are reading them. So Paul Sutton's loved it that public library patrons can check out the school library books. We just create a quick record in our catalog. It's pretty simple. My next plan of action will be getting all the school libraries to be on our same system, so it would be totally seamless, but that's kingdom building for another day.
Okay, so this is just for information for us tonight, so we're aware if you have objections, then I would ask that you raise them now, because I assume the next step is lawyers looking at our agreements and so forth.
Yeah.
And we'd come back with an MOU.
That's correct. Yeah, the next steps would be to which actually could start even tonight with Scott showing some designs. Next steps would be the legal agreement, which would be just an extending the MOU from one school to another school, and working out those details, and then back for your guys' consideration. So.
Okay, so it's not action, but I'm going to ask for head nods if you're supportive of this.
I see heads nodding.
Heads
Lovely.
are nodding. Okay.
All right. Thanks very much.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Betty.
Okay, Dr. Cook, Mr. Voller, I see him jumping up there. Is he coming up?
Yep.
Okay.
We're, Director of Operations Jeff Voller is going to come up, and we're going to get to hear from some friends of ours, which is exciting considering how far we've come together.
All right. Good evening, Chairman Morris Rowe, Superintendent Cook, members of the board. I'm going to start by briefly just giving you guys an update before I introduce my friends on what's going on at the Lakes Middle School remodel. So I just brought you a few pictures today just to show you where we're at with that. So I didn't bring a picture of this, but the book warehouse is totally gone now. It's just open space right there. And then this is the courtyard area in the kind of the U shape of Lakes. They've scraped all the topsoil out of there. Dry wells are in for drainage. Right now they have excavated and are building footings and getting ready to pour footings this week. So just kind of to update you guys on where we're at with that project. And then shifting over to the Prairie Avenue Elementary School, pleased to let you know that the sewer has been installed and is stubbed out to our property. So it is currently there waiting for us to tie into. And it looks like they are putting down base layer for the road to go in as well. So they're making a lot of progress there. As far as plan design, we just received last week what we call the 50% drawings, which means they are, the whole concepts are basically in place now, and the architects have submitted those to the engineers, and I'll let them go into more detail about exactly where they're at with that. And so with that, I want to introduce our architect team, Scott Fisher and John Mueller from Architects West, and invite them to come up. And I'm not sure how you guys are tag teaming this, but we'll have Seth pull up your guys' designs that you guys are going to share, and we'll have you talk through. So I'm going to give the rest of my time to our architect team. Got the site plan?
Yeah, I think so. That's what I got. I think we'll start on the site first.
Okay. Looks like he's, yep, there we go. There you go. Okay, good.
Good evening. Everybody see okay and take a look at the site plan. Hopefully you're somewhat familiar with this as we have kind of moved forward, and see if I get this mouse to work the way I want it to, just to kind of orient you. Where you see the cursor now is the north part of the site. This is Prairie Avenue as it bounds the project on the north. On the west is the new street that's being built as part of the new subdivision, and our primary access is off this extension on a street called Cedar View, and our sewer is stubbed right to this point. Based on the negotiations and discussions we had with the Lakes Highway District, our principal site access is at this point, this single point, coming in from the west. And so in kind of developing the site, we have tried to set up a one-way access flow for parents to arrive to drop off kids and to pick up kids. As they arrive at the site, they would take a right and come down through this part of the site, circling back. And it's a little tough to see, but we have multiple drop-off lanes adjacent to this long area, and we would have valet drop-off and pickup. And so the cars would line up back in this direction, but the disembarkment and embarkment points would be located here. And we have done that because of the challenges with access and the ability to sequence and safely get kids in and out of the school and in and out of cars and away. In addition, this all becomes a one-way flow for parking. We've provided on-site parking for about 140 cars, most of which is in this south area. For kids arriving riding buses, the buses would make a left turn and pull through this bus loop and would be unloading along this point, this series of drop-off areas here, with the principal access into the play space here in the center. And then buses would sequence back out and leave the site. The intent, of course, is to separate or segregate the access and circulation types, again, trying to enhance safety. We've got a little bit of staff parking provided along the bus loop. And so that sort of gives you an idea of how we would access our site and the challenges we faced with getting people in and out, and the limitations, obviously, for safely getting people in and out. We have a series of, to make this work, a series of railings that run the full length of this, both sides of this drop-off area here and here, with 2 crossing points, one on the west and one on the east. And again, the intent is to bring people to 2 central crossing points that are safe and visible, and controlling unrestricted access across the drive where cars are backed up and queued, and we don't want people running in between cars. We have a service access and emergency access here for trash. The trash and the dumpster location will be here. It's kind of hidden behind the school. And principal front door access would be at this point, and Scott is going to talk about that. We also have an accessible drop-off here. Code says if we have one long drop-off for unchallenged students, physically challenged, we also have to provide some for physically challenged folks as well. The playground is secured by fencing all the way to the perimeter fencing, which I'll talk about in a little bit. All this entire area that you see right here is the play space. Just to give you an idea of the scale, from this western fence to the school is just short of being a football field in length, so there's quite a bit of play space. But this also is probably as compact and tight an elementary school as I think I've ever designed, and I think I've done a bunch in almost 30 years. But the idea is to have this larger central hard surface play space. We have hardened this portion of it with a 6-inch section of concrete because in our discussions with the fire department, they want to be able to pull in and pull a truck all the way into the heart of the site to be able to fight fire. But from this point separating out, we have a place for kids to have play, I guess, wall ball or ball wall. There we have 2 basketball courts separated. Dr. Cook has asked us to provide additional basketball hoops at those locations, which we've done. The large central play space and play equipment would happen here. And then this large green free play space occurs to the north. And then in discussions with Bill, once this was designated as the Nexus site, Bill also wanted us to look at the addition of 2 outdoor classroom or education spaces, which we have shown here and here. If you're familiar with the work we did at Fernan, the 2 shelters that we built out on that site, that's what we're proposing here, all accessible through site walkways, and these would be bid as alternates and would be constructed as allowed, but the hope is that eventually those will drop into place. Bill also asked us for a space for a garden, and so that's the beginnings of the next experiment in agriculture going forward. And so there's quite a bit of activity, intense activity that's able to happen. The entire site has a perimeter fence, which will be include 100% site obscuring slats, just to kind of give that additional security, but also to kind of protect the uses, the residential uses here. The highway district kind of insisted we do the same thing on the north border because they didn't want an attractive nuisance. They didn't want kids maybe who might be across the street to look across and see a school site or a play space and to be running across the street. The primary service access does come off the north. We spent a lot of time, as you well know, in our discussions with the highway district about how to best make this work. Finally got to yes, but we have a small turnaround, a hammerhead area for people in case they do pull in. They have a place to kind of pull in, back around, and turn back out. But the access is primarily right in and right out. And then there are a series of islands that are built and dividers that will be built in Prairie to restrict traffic flow. And so the general public will only have one way to arrive at the site in the near term, which is down Moselle and coming in from the west at that point. I'm trying to think of what else I can tell you about other than we're trying to manage all the things that we like to do from a site design standpoint, stormwater and grading, and trying to save some trees. These symbols right here that you see are some of the large mature trees that were there on site that we've tried to save just to create some sense of maturity for the site. We are planting additional trees. And then obviously just off site there's a grove of large trees right here. We are also in this backside providing 7 parking spaces for your staff, kitchen staff and maintenance staff as the need may arise. It was kind of a difficult thing with the highway district to get to yes on that, but I think they understand that this is not a high intensity use and access for the folks that would make use of that. We also have right here an articulating gate, a gate that would swing up rather than swing open, that would have either a digital key access or a prox card would be used to actuate it. And I think that was another condition that the highway district had for us, is that they wanted complete security on that north side to keep people out. They're very, as you know, concerned about the impact to the function of their 5-lane arterial.
So there's going to be a service entrance only signage, I imagine.
That's
there
correct.
With right turn only if they go out of there too,
Yeah,
right?
that's correct. It would be signed as not a public entrance, service access only, right in, right out. And so with that,
John, can I ask you 2 questions on this? If you're
yeah,
getting ready to
absolutely.
hand off.
Just going to say whatever questions you may have.
One is just perimeter fencing. That's all within the school district. What you just talked about, the chain link fencing with the slats.
Correct.
Are we aware of anything that the developer's doing to the west of us?
We are not. I think we can make that adjustment, but I think as we go forward, I'd rather have it in the budget and delete it than to have to come to you and say, guess what, we need fencing, and it's going to be this amount of money.
Sure.
And
then
so,
the other,
go ahead. Okay.
The other question I was just going to ask, I think when the city of Coeur d'Alene approved some apartments that are just to the east of this site, 15 acres.
Yes.
I believe I heard they were requiring them to have a walking trail that would land at our school. And I think it's going to land in that bottom right corner somewhere.
One of the things we have done is we've sort of pushed this down into the ground. Part of that's to get the thing to drain. Part of it is to kind of buffer the surrounding land uses. I think Jeff came to me and Brian came to me and said, we really need to grade this part of the site right here to be able to get a sidewalk through to that point, which we have done. So if and when that becomes a reality, that pedestrian connection is available to bring kids into the site.
And then I'll just mention it, that same developer has like 5 acres of trees that I don't know what they're going to do with them, but they're putting apartments there, so they're going to have to get rid of 5 acres of trees pretty much. I don't know what you're looking for trees. You were talking about adding more trees there, or if it'd be worth it, but they're nice.
Well,
manageable,
we'd have to take a
movable
look
trees.
at that to see the size of them and how easy it would be to move, but sometimes it's not as easy as one might expect. Yet, given the market for trees today, it's tough. It's really tough to find decent-sized trees. So, other questions?
I had a question on the setback on the Moselle, that development side. What is this going to be the setback between the two, between their development and our school? 10 feet or?
What is the
setback? Yeah, between the two, the school and the new development.
From here, it's it's about. I want to say about, well, that's 20, that's 25, so it's 45, 50. This is about 60 feet from fence to building.
Oh, that's nice, yeah.
And then on the north, I think it's similar, about 60 to 65. I think our standard setbacks in the residential zone are 25 and 10 feet on the side, so we're well beyond that, or well within it, depending on your perspective, in terms of the way we have the setback. And the same is true for these outdoor classrooms, which are also considered as structures to be regulated. Other questions? This has been, as you all know, a difficult place to get to. As I say, probably one of the most compact sites I think I've ever designed. I know that we're in the mood for efficiency, but at 7.5 acres, I think in the future I would encourage you to at least look for one more acre.
Obviously, you didn't work on Sorensen.
Well, that's true. That's right. So, with that, other questions before I turn it to the other half of the class of 1973 Coeur d'Alene Vikings in this presentation? Okay, Scott?
Okay. Well, again, thank you for having us, and I'm going to see if this opens up what I think it should, which is our floor plan. And I'll also try to do the mouse thing. As you may know, this school facility is 2-story on the classroom wing. So that wing over on the north and the right-hand side here and here are 2-story portions. And so Trustee Mayor, question about, the setbacks and I would say relative impact of a structure on that site is fairly important because that's a 2-story, 30-foot tall edifice, if you will. Actually, that classroom wing is a couple feet taller than the height of the gym. And so it does have a significant bearing on that part of the site. So it is nice that John was able to work with us to move it as far away as we can and still retain as much site as we can. But anyway, let me start down here at the bottom, which is the main entry here. And so John had talked about the drop-off that occurs all the way across the south edge of the site. And one of the things I'll talk about first, so that I can humor my friend Betty and talk about the library, is that the library ended up right here. Whoa. Hang on, I have to gather some cord. Okay, that helped. The library ended up right here. Originally in this plan, the library was over here, and we were trying to make work if you chose to participate in the library use at this elementary school, what we would have to do to get toilet facilities and to get another entry for the public and so forth into that library and make it work. And finally, after talking to Betty a couple of times, I had this light bulb go off in my head and said, well, stupid, why don't you move, okay. Why don't you move the library from here over to here, because we already have the city kind of set up to use the gym at night for rec purposes. And what we did was we set up a private entry or a separate entry for them, if you will. We put a set of doors here to segregate this part of the structure from the community, wandering through when the rest of the school's not open. So when we moved the library over here, it became a no-brainer to enter the library if you're public from here and come in and use the library and go out and use the toilet rooms, but you can't go in the rest of the building. So that's what we ended up doing. It was I think, a fairly simple fix. And I really think it probably was not only good for the library and for the layout of the school, but it really gave us a little bit more room to spread out the admin functions, which are over here onto the side. It made our entry, which we're trying to treat with a certain amount of security now as a school entry, a little bit easier to deal with because we were able to take that library element out of that function. And so that works pretty well. So somebody can come in this door, they can interact at the window here with the receptionist, and until they're buzzed through here, they can't go anywhere, which is exactly what we're trying to do. So once you get into the building beyond the gym or the library and the admin, you're right in the middle of the commons. You're also therefore right off the kitchen. So the serving kitchen is right here. Mechanical and electrical rooms are in the back. Teachers, staff break area is right here next to the kitchen. We wish that it was bigger, but it's one of the things that as as you know, originally this facility was programmed to be about 5,000 square feet bigger than it ended up, strictly for Nexa. And so in the course of a year and a half of whittling and picking sites and all this stuff that you're obviously well aware of, we kind of winnowed this thing down in scale and then went back and tried to make changes that would work for the Nexa program, that some of which we had already taken out, and put them back in without impacting a great deal of the square footage. And I think we've been pretty successful doing that. I think Bill's very happy. But I think one thing that, you know, if we had more money and more room to deal with, we'd probably give the teachers a little bit bigger spot. But that worked out okay. So the way this is designed is that the commons with an operable partition, which is kind of like a stage opening, opens a platform up here, opens onto the commons. So if you have a small venue and you want to have some kind of a function like that that needs sort of a stage, it can happen off of this platform and work this way. Or that partition can close, and the other one on the other side that opens into the gym can open up, say, for a assembly or something like that, Christmas program, what have you, and it can be directed out to this side of the gymnasium. So we've got some double duty going on with the platform, which is where the music programs would occur. We have some offices for the PE people and the music teacher, and then we have some staff toilets here. The kindergarten.
Can I ask you a question?
Yes,
What's
sir.
the security from that platform out to the commons? I mean, if somebody wants to go through the gym, can they go through that? Is there? You said those are. You know what I'm saying? If you're in the gym and you want to go out to the commons, or just talking about.
Yeah, this shows, I think this shows incorrectly that these doors actually are positioned so they swing in, and therefore they can lock. So you can't get into the commons from here, and this door, when it shuts, it locks, so you can't get up onto that platform and across and back down.
And
Now, I guess you could if this partition was open, but if that partition is open, it's more than just a after-hours City of Coeur d'Alene function. It's going to involve the school district as well. So we kind of feel there's some control there.
So if the partition is closed, that's secure.
Well, I don't know that I'd say that it's perfectly secure, but it's certainly not an inviting open door to somebody to say, oh, I can just wander through there. Brian, do you know how tough those are to get in and out of?
It's just about impossible. There's a special wrench that is put into the side of the partitions that you have to crank to lift the feet up, and then you can, like an accordion, open and close it. But it's not easily at all. And those cranks are on the inside, on top of the platform, so you have to be inside on the platform to undo that and open them up.
Okay, well, thanks for the clarification. I was just wondering what the security was there. Thank you.
And so then, originally, as programmed as Nexus space, this was going to be a maker space only. And what we've ended up doing is, depending on the configuration of students for a particular year, that will either be used as a kindergarten or as a maker space. So we have some windows here that can be blind, put blinds up to break them or block them off from the commons. But as a maker space, we want this sort of as engaging from the commons as it can be. However, if it's used as a kindergarten, obviously that function changes a little bit. So this kindergarten and this kindergarten share storage rooms and a toilet here. And as you get to the north end of the commons, it becomes a little more private, eventually going to a place where there's actually a door that segregates it. So at night, if you had a function going on in the school, the classroom wings essentially can be closed off.
Is the commons also used as lunchroom?
Yes, it is.
Okay, just wanted to verify that.
And so the tables are stored for that lunchroom right in here. And I think they're looking at 3 different sections of lunch based on the number of tables that we've programmed to fit. The beauty of this as a lunch is, as soon as kids cycle through here and eat their lunch, they can go right out this door and be on the playground. And so if you remember, If you were to come straight across at this point, you would eventually over here hit the bus loop that John pointed out. So that's right in the middle of the playground.
And they're not worried at all if the commons is lunch and they have kindergartners in there, it's not going to be loud or distracting. They'll just close the shades, I'm guessing.
Yeah.
They're good with that.
Mm-hmm.
On that, the makerspace and the windows there, it seems like as I've been touring around schools, I've noticed in some of our libraries, that was the concept, right? Have them inviting from the hallways.
Mm-hmm.
And all those windows are covered almost in every school that has them, because I think it has to do with their lockdown rules. And if there was a lockdown, they have to, the kids have to be not visible, right? And so a lot of those are just covered in paper or covered in, they've plywood. I don't know if they've plywooded over, Brian, or put shelving in front of them. It seems to me at Hayden Meadows, they've put some shelving in front of them, but. Right. I guess my point is we know we're going to be tight on budget, so why are we throwing windows in if we're just going to cover them? But I mean, it just may be something for consideration, or maybe in the design of that, of how can we provide a shelter place and still have the windows.
Yeah, it's a good comment.
So we know. Right.
So then, as you head farther, north down the classroom wing, you have kindergarten classrooms that adjoin first grade and second grade. The bathrooms are in the middle of the wing with a little bit of a jut out, a workroom and a teacher's bathroom. And life skills is here also in the middle. And then up at the north end is an exit way that again gets you back out onto the playground over here, or takes you upstairs. The upstairs, we'll start down off the commons. So there's an open stairway at the north end of the commons that allows you to go up and really stand on a balcony here and look down into that space. So we think that's going to be a really fun, exciting space. We're going to have some natural light coming in the south end here. And then the art room is upstairs. And then third, fourth, and fifth grades, as well as some other ALP and resource and title spaces are upstairs. And those are really just office-only spaces for staff, because what they have told us when we programmed is that those functions are going to be administered to kids in classrooms. It's not like they're going to go grab kids and bring them into those spaces. So those are more for offices, but it does get the people closer to where their needs are. You have another workroom upstairs with another teacher's toilet, student toilets here, janitor in the middle, and then additional classrooms, and of course the stairway back down.
Scott, is there an elevator next to the stairway there?
Yeah, the elevator is right there.
That's it? Okay, thank you.
And so, as you can see, this door that subdivides or I guess secures the upstairs, you would allow somebody to go up to the balcony, let's say if it was the school was open at night or the commons was open at night, but they couldn't get any farther down into the classrooms. And that, we kind of consciously thought about that, thinking, well, there might be some art programs or something going on that, you want to get into the art room, but you don't want them getting everywhere. And then just the fact that this element here where the stair is at the north end, it's kind of the focal point. After you come in, you're going to see that stair, you're going to see that balcony coming across here, and I think it's really going to draw you in and up into that space. So we're pretty excited about the way that works. So is there any questions about the plan that I could answer?
Where's Bill going to have his chickens?
I'm sorry? Where's his chicken coop?
I wonder if Bill's going to have his chickens. I just wondered.
Yeah, I don't know about that
I don't know about that one, huh?
I had one question, Scott. So the kindergartners, if they do use that optional room for kindergarten, then where would those little guys use the restroom? Would they have to go all the way down the hall?
There's the restroom right here.
Oh, perfect. So there is a restroom. Okay, so they both
Yeah,
have.
so both kindergartens, there's a kindergarten here, and here, and they share a restroom as well as a storage room. And so actually the idea for the maker space there was not a bad idea either, because there's going to be stuff that they're going to need to store, and some of that maybe could be used there as well. I think the only thing that we ended up kind of sacrificing when we swapped sites from the original discussion with Bill and his Nexus staff was that I think at one time we're hoping that the makerspace room would be on the playground side so they could go right outside, and that really didn't happen. But I think, we couldn't make it all work, so we tried to make the things that we thought were the most important work, and hopefully we're hitting the sweet spot.
How many people could be in the commons area for a performance? Or I know he likes to do his exhibitions, and there was a problem at the current site because it was...
Well, there's not a ton of space to seat around here, so maybe, it's a pretty small venue, 80 to 100 or so. But, of course, when you come in here, we're reusing bleachers that Brian pulled out of Coeur d'Alene High School. And Brian, do you know how many there are? Is there 350 or something?
Yeah, I think there's something like 340.
Okay. So typically when we do these schools, when we put bleachers in, we never end up with enough bleachers to seat every kid for an assembly. But they love sitting on the floor. And so, you pull the bleachers out and then the rest of them sit on the floor. So I'm going to see if I can.
Quick question for you, and this might be a Jeff question or a Brian question, but when we, the 2 parcels we bought from the one family, which I can't think of their name right now, part of that is, it was kind of memorial, either the lunchroom, which there isn't one, or the library or the gym was, it's going to be memorialized, the parents who owned that acreage there. Do we know where that's going? Cofield, thank you. You reminded me with a C. Or just the parties have changed for the district, so maybe just so you're all aware of that. That was part of our purchase agreement of that 5 acres there, so somewhere it needs to be the Cofield it was very specific language, but okay. Okay, thank you.
Okay, so this is a view of the south front entry of the school, looking from that southeast corner, essentially where the apartment traffic, would come if that opening was included in there. And so this is the opening of the commons with some glazing up there to let in some light. This is the admin wing and the library back under here. And then the gym's back on this side, and the ball wall that John was talking about would be back on this other side. And then we also have another view of the northwest end of the classroom wing. So the playground is over here. This is the gym. Of course, this is the 2-story classroom piece. So basically, that's what we've got.
And it's a block building, or that's?
It's got block elements to it, the gym, and these bump out elements here and this element on the end are decorative concrete block. The rest of it is steel frame construction with corrugated steel walls and steel siding and block wainscots at the bottom for durability and, kids being kids. We're on schedule, hopefully to wrap up our documents by the end of this month, get it to the city for their plan review, and simultaneous to that, go out to bid. Right now, we're looking at approximately the 27th of June as a bid opening date, and we're hoping, of course, to turn it around really quickly, award a contract and get under construction by the middle of July, so that, we give a contractor 13 months, which is kind of by the skin of our teeth, but that's all we've got. So we're feeling like we're going to be in just good enough shape on the time. As many of you know, we just bid a slightly smaller school facility in Post Falls about a week ago. It came in right on our budget hopes, about $203 or $4 a square foot. So this one's a little bit bigger, but we're feeling pretty good that we're going to get some good attention, and then we'll get some good numbers on here as well. So hopefully things are going to line up time-wise so that you can, in fact, meet that occupancy of fall of 2020. Thank you.
I think it's excellent. I just want to ask a question. It's just something that came to my mind. You know, as far as the energy efficiency, and you have south-facing building, you ever think about passive solar or active solar or anything like that, or is that just too much to?
Well, this building, just because the energy code is required to be pretty super efficient, we just don't have a lot of initial money right now to put into some of those kind of features. Other than, Brian, why don't you talk a little bit about the ground source heat pump system?
Change for us. Not only is the equipment much more effective now than it was back like when we did Lake City High School, but right now the equipment is so efficient, and we are adding an option in here that's different, and they're taking all of the fresh air requirements for the building is a completely separate system, and by doing that you can also really utilize your gas and your electricity rates for warming up the building, cooling the building down, ventilation. And so any temperatures that are changing inside or outside the building, you can take advantage of that air coming and going. So they're two separate systems completely. So it's really quite the system that's going in here right now. And I think it, well, I'd be really surprised if it wasn't the most efficient building you're going to see, because I mean, we've proven many years ago with Lake City High School by stacking buildings is very big thing when it comes to efficiency, when it comes to heating up.
And this, I assume, will have LED lighting and that sort of thing, like we're doing then, or have done in all of our other buildings.
Yep. Well, thank you very much.
I think it looks great.
Appreciate it.
Looks very cool. Okay, thank you, gentlemen, for coming down. Okay, Dr. Nelson, are you ready with some course pacing guides here?
Only if you call me your friend as well.
Of course.
Good evening, everyone. I am pleased to share with you the work of our content committees as we present to you brand new course pacing guides. We have been working diligently to do several different things. The first is to be able to identify the current states of content for our district. What I mean by that is our standards are changing. Our expectations as a district continue to change. We want the best for our students. And as we adopt new materials and look at the new standards, we want to make sure that the documents that we're providing our community also reflect that. So brand new day course pacing guides for you in 612 language arts are in your packet for information. These were created by our content teachers and reviewed by all of their colleagues over the last 30 days. So this does reflect best practice in our current schools. Those will also continue to be available now for 30-day public comment, where we'll post them on our district website. So anybody who has an interest in any of the courses that you see will be able to provide their feedback before we request your action next month. So brand new course pacing guides for 612 language arts, mostly because of brand new texts that you approved this last year in middle school and in high school. Also, in looking at psychology, chemistry, statistics, pre-calculus, ALP pre-calculus, and senior math, We recognized as part of the curriculum audit that it's been a little while since we've reviewed some of those. So some of them were up to 10 years old. So we went through, worked with our content teachers, made sure that our new standards were front and center with their current adopted materials, and have brand new guides in your hand. The only unique one in there that you might have a little deja vu with are both judo and co-ed judo. And they are back for only one reason. They were approved by your body as an elective course. However, Coeur d'Alene High School, who has activated the course for this next year, would also like to see them as meeting the PE graduation requirement. Per policy, to be able to do that, 2 additional elements needed to be included. Number 1, basic body physiology, so they'll be reviewing bones and muscles. And in addition, we require all students who receive a PE credit to receive instruction on using or on CPR via an automated external defibrillator. I've been practicing that. So those 2 elements were the only things that were added to those course pacing guides. But without policy, which allows us to make that change without your discretion, we made sure that we brought it back to you for information, and we'll again request that back in June. So there's your quick synopsis. We certainly have a lot more work to go in terms of getting everything up and ready, but I am glad to be able to answer any questions on these documents in your hands.
Questions for Dr. Nelson? There was a lot of reading there.
My one question was, and you explained it in your introduction as why we were doing all of these pacing guides, so thank you for explaining that. That was one of my questions. The other one just was on English 9, and I didn't quite understand where you it's under scope and sequence, and the 2 sentences below it says, exchange board-approved novel 4 weeks, and supplementary My Perspective 2 weeks with any of the above units, 2 per year. I wasn't sure I got that.
Sure. We require our content teachers to teach a minimum of 2 full-length novels as part of the work. As you can imagine, their choice of when those novels go in will adjust the scope and sequence along the way. So we're giving our content teachers choice as to where they put their novels, and wherever those novels end up playing, it's going to reduce the other content in and around. Now, certainly our teachers are skillful in trying to bring in not only English conventions, but understanding the development of the novels themselves. And in many cases, the novels will be interdisciplinary. They could be used for multiple themes in there. But that was the guidance that we've provided so far.
That makes sense. And then as far as the scope and sequence, is this kind of, we're approving it, is this kind of their roadmap for the year?
It is.
So the roadmap, like this is, I was kind of reading through and wondering, well, there's a lot on here. Is the expectation from the district, from the board, that this is what's covered, or is it just kind of a suggestion? Because we haven't really, I guess, had that conversation, and so I know that's part of the reason why we're reviewing them, and I was just curious your thought on that.
Well, I had a similar question in the development of this, and my response, although may have been a little bit coarse, is that the contract states that you will teach the curriculum of the school district.
Okay.
And ultimately, by approving this, you are saying this is what we believe should be covered in this course. So yes.
I thought it was important because I think parents, as we update our website and parents are following along and wanting to know what their children are doing in class, this makes it really easy because they can say, oh, well, Johnny should be doing this, and so I think it's nice that we're updating these and that we're going to post them on our website. I like how it's clear that they can follow along with the text. So thank you. I think it'll make it a lot easier for families or parents to be connected with what their students are doing in school.
Our previous guides were verbose, and for one particular course, we would have a course pacing guide of 20 to 30 pages. We really have worked hard to not be so scripted to our content teachers, but to really rely upon their expertise as well. By providing them a roadmap and a coverage of standards, it allows them to do that. And it provides that same level of feedback. And plug for our course description handbook. All of our content is right there, so our content teachers and parents, guardians, and students can see the exact same scope and sequence along the way.
So content teachers have seen these, they're comfortable with these, everybody's on the same page, and this is just the final step in saying.
Presented to you, this has gone through the initial content committee, so 2 or 3 teachers per grade level coming together and saying, yes, this is what works. Then we've sent it out for 30-day review and comment mode to all content teachers in that department or grade level. So they've had the opportunity to be able to provide any feedback that they want. We go back to the content committee, look at that again, refine it before it comes to you.
Great. Thank you.
Dr. Nelson, I have a couple questions for you.
Ready.
last year, 6th through 12th grade language arts, we adopted new materials. Is that
Correct.
right? Okay. So it seems like, particularly in the fall and at particular buildings, there was feedback just, in regards to that process and maybe some frustration on some of that curriculum, right? If I remember right, we had opposing viewpoints or opinions on what.
At the high school level,
Yeah,
that
at the high
was
school
the
level,
case.
which resources we should purchase, and I think we went. One school didn't get what they wanted.
Correct.
And I don't know if it was an interpretation or if it was kind of the actual, but they felt it was very rigid and kind of scripted. And I think I've even heard the term teaching by workbook, or that's not the right term, but it was workbook English. Is that what they called it? Workbook English. Yeah. And there was frustration that it lacked the ability kind of for full text novels, that it was pieces of
excerpts
of popular and famous works and important literature, but it lacked that kind of the novel base, particularly at the secondary level. So are we addressing that here, and has that feedback been embedded into this?
Yeah, Chair Morrisroe, there have been two things that I think have been key to us. We've had embedded professional development at least 4 times this year. And yes, we all recognize there is no perfect text. It doesn't matter what it is, there's going to be something. And we have very traditional viewpoints about language arts in our district, and we have for a long time. One of the things that has actually been beneficial is that we've spent a lot of time in content teams bringing people together and showing them how they're using the materials. We have not gone to the point where we ask that everybody teaches page 4 all at the same time. We want them to experience what using a text is like. And yes, there are some pretty rote activities within the text. One of the things that they've experienced in using the excerpts is that it's actually providing more students an opportunity to expand upon something that they didn't think they'd find interested in. Grade 10 is an example of that. It starts with a lot of titles that are suspenseful. And they actually found that a lot of students were going out and getting copies of Poe from the library and reading deeper into it because they were inspired by what they read in that small excerpt. One of the things that Dr. Cook and I have also talked about is that right now we have a philosophy that every student in the class should be reading the same novel. And that really restricts some of the choice that our students have in terms of the complexity and the depth. And if a student's read a title before, we want to expand upon that. So we're looking to continually provide those supports along the way. I would say that the staff has been supportive, but there are still the begrudgings going on that we may have gotten it wrong. But I'll tell you that the text is helping us quite a bit in leading some of those transformations.
Okay, and then my second question, I actually have a third one too. I'm creating them as we go. But my second question is really to you, Dr. Cook. Just we've got our thick curriculum audit that you're reading right now coming out, and how we just kind of embed whatever recommendations might be in there in this process and in this work now, these pacing guides, I guess, because I assume they're going to have some feedback on our curriculum and what we're doing in our building. So how will we kind of fit that into these?
Yeah, so let me take one of the things Dr. Nelson briefly mentioned and connect it to your current question, and that is we're going to continue working on this information. Dr. Nelson and I have already started this idea of getting feedback on how to provide more flexibility and choice with novels, with regards to novels. And our teachers will tell you, at least I should say some of our teachers will tell you that the ability to try to get a novel approved is difficult and quite restrictive. And from the day one a teacher says, I would love to have this to be approved novel for kids to read, to the point of implementation could be arguably 6 to 12 months. And so that kind of responsiveness, is, in our opinion, has to be improved. And so one of the things that we're going to do is get that back in front of the teachers and bring something to you, policy modifications that will make that less onerous. The second part of that question, or the answer, is 364 pages that we will be getting in the audit, and it's real-time feedback that they've taken from all the 1,900 different documents and materials that were submitted to us, and those will then be feeding into the recommendations that they're giving us with next steps. And in every case, the indications that I've seen so far is that we're talking about 3 to 5 years of next steps. And so the one thing that I can tell you about these pacing guides is as long as these are coming from content teachers, we're going to support that work. The next steps will be, this is all going to be treated like an evergreen document that we are going to continually update and make sure that all the best practices are being addressed with this. Dr. Nelson and I have talked about this immensely, and that this next board meeting in which we start to dive into and look at the audit findings and the materials and what their next recommendations are will drive decision making for this district potentially for the next 3 to 5 years on a lot of different levels, including how to best make use of pacing guides. I will say I have been doing a lot of listening sessions lately, and I asked very explicit conversation or questions about the secondary language arts adoption, and I expected to hear a lot of frustration, and I actually have gotten quite a bit of positive feedback that people actually have liked some of the excerpts and liked that methodology. The thing that I've heard the most is if we wish to choose a novel to supplement the text, that has been significantly problematic. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Final question, ALP pre-calculus, is it honors pre-calculus, right?
Yes. We've made a commitment to you that the course title will be changed. Everything ALP will be changed at the end of this academic year to the word honors for the 2019-20 school year.
Thank you.
I just wanted to say thank you, Dr. Nelson. I actually rather enjoyed going through the pacing guides, and I had a captive audience in my car. So I read my husband all of the novels that the high school was going to be reading, and he was kind of excited about a couple of them. I want to do that one with Dylan. I said, well, can't promise he's going to get that one, but it was fun.
Thank you. And there's a lot of great traditional titles, things that we have read ourselves back in our high school days, with some very unique modern titles as well. So I think we're in a very dynamic time.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Nelson. Any further questions on the pacing guides? Okay. Why don't we move on to item H, which is whole group instructional material adoption.
You know, we have also been spending a lot of time with our content committees, Chair Morrisroe, spending a little bit of money. And part of that is to address the fact that many of our content areas have never had a consistent adoption. And it's sad, but at the same time, we are so thankful to our local voters who continue to support our supplemental levy to be able to provide that. The first is in developmental preschool. These are for our students that are pre-identified as may needing some additional supports as they inch toward kindergarten. For developmental preschool, over the last 6 months, we've been taking a look at 4 different titles, and they have recommended to you tonight Get Set for School from Learning Without Tears. You may be familiar with Handwriting Without Tears, which is what we use to teach handwriting and cursive handwriting from grades kindergarten through 5. A heavy dose of manipulatives, a balance of engagement with resources was highlighted in the board summary with this, with one of our teachers saying, I can't say enough good stuff about it. And this is an educator that's been in our district for over 25 years. So that is always a good sign to be able to see. Right now, samples for Get Set for School are sitting at our district office, so anybody in the public can come by, play with some manipulatives. There's puppets, there's big books. It'd be a lot of fun. And we'll come back to you with feedback that we receive over the next 30 days and requests for action this next month. In addition to that, we've been taking a look at English language intervention. Unfortunately, in our schools, we do have some students that are more than 2 grade levels behind where they should be and need some very intensive support in reading. Over the past several months, our teachers have been using Achieve 3000 in 2 middle schools and both of our traditional high schools. We have seen some very strong gains in those pilot schools. It aligned perfectly with our standardized assessments, both NWA MAP as well as the ISAT, and the ability to track students along their growth was really highly noted. This would be a smaller adoption for us for only probably about 100 to 140 students in our secondary schools. The final recommendation that we have for you from the content committee is from our 2 teachers of AP Literature and Composition at both Coeur d'Alene and Lake City High School. They currently use literature and composition and sound and sense. However, one of the tenets of the College Board who runs the AP program is that your instructional material should be no older than 8 years old, and this is the 8th year of those texts. So to keep our content current and to meet the course audit from AP, we would simply like to recommend moving to the next edition of both literature and composition. That would be the 2nd edition, and Perrine Sound and Sense now at the 15th edition. Everything's up there again, so you can start with preschool and you can end with some very deep literature all the way throughout at the district office for the month of May.
Dr. Nelson, on the preschool materials, have we conferred with the Head Start folks at all? And I know there's been some, in the past, just some conversations there, I guess at least, that really what they're doing may not align real well with what we're doing, what our expectations are for our incoming kindergarten folks. And just wondering if we're doing this, if now's the appropriate time to be just engaging with them on that work to get us on the same page. I know they've expressed some interest to that, I think. So has any of that taken place?
Morrisroe, I have not been privy to any of those conversations, so I'm sorry to be able to tell you that. However, I can tell you that our Director of Special Education as well as an instructional coach in special education are part of our content committee. I will follow up with them and have to follow up with you via email, but I am not aware of any ongoing conversation with Head Start at this point.
Okay. I think those were Dr. Olson conversations and President McLennan at NIC that had expressed those in the past.
I will have to follow up.
Yep. Thank you. Okay. Any other questions on these materials for Dr. Nelson? These are here for information. They'll be out for review for the next 30 days, available to the public, and then back next month with comments and for action.
Correct.
Okay, thank you, Dr.
Thank you,
Nelson. Okay. Are you staying, Dr. Nelson? Is this Dr. Orozco? It's tag team?
I'm here.
Good evening, trustees. I think that the very huge investment in time at the board workshop means you deserve for me to go lickety-split through this presentation. You've paid your dues. So this is information, and you received in the board summary just about our progress and our recommendations for the ELA adoption. And truly, if I sort of click through too quickly, just holler at me, okay? I did share with our ELA content committee, I shared with them the beginning conversation we all had about our own reading lives and some of the insights you shared with each other and with us about your own reading lives. And they were truly fascinated by your reading stories, and some of them touched them, like especially those ones about the groups. So once again, when we talk about a balanced literacy program, we all know that we're talking about 3 dimensions, and we kind of, I would say we dissected that at length together at the workshop. But those 3 legs of the stool are critical for any sort of ELA adoption and curriculum decision-making. That fluency, those foundational skills are absolutely essential. That thinking and understanding is critical. We heard about that. Dr. Cottle and Dr. Cook and I heard a little bit about that from our high schoolers as well, about the importance of thinking and being asked to think deeply. And then passion and agency, and that third leg of the stool is what often was overlooked, especially after NCLB. And we know this. We know it's so critical that it's even more important than a child's socioeconomic status in terms of what we can predict for success. If kids love to read, if we can do everything we can to affirm their lives as readers. And I think it might have been Lisa May who guessed both of those correctly when we were in the board workshop, that factors that actually make a big difference in reading improvement are access to interesting texts and choice over what kids read. We heard that once again today too. Choice and voice, so critical for all of our learners, but particularly for our young readers. We mentioned that this work that we have been doing, and especially when you think about choice and access to good texts, we knew 4 years ago we needed partners who would help us bring classroom libraries to life. And that's not as important for a veteran teacher, but it certainly is for beginning teachers. Classroom libraries are an expensive investment. And so we began in 2015-16 in a conversation with our community, with CdA, is it 2030? And all of our friends. Those pictures actually represent people who have done work with us. Sharing leadership, finding exemplars, understanding trauma is where we are right now. That's that kind of added piece that we've added to our work together. So that I'm going to go back. How do I do that? This is a 4-year timeline that explains that explains our work and our efforts. After that is kind of an 8-month timeline. Those are the content committee and lead content committee meetings that we've had. We've also met with instructional coaches and elementary administrators, culminating with our board workshop on April 15th. The content committee came together 11 days after that and listened to what your comments and your insights, and pulled together some experiences from Fernan and Nexa, who shared their thoughts about using a writing curriculum pilot that we'll talk about here. My guess is the fact that literacy, ELA adoptions, the fact that reading, writing, speaking, and listening are all 4 critical dimensions of that adoption, my guess is that gets overlooked. Once again, our people were learning last week at the Thinking Strategies Institutes how much reading and writing, how much of that begins in the oral community of children, and how expert we have to be at creating that kind of community. Much of what we have been reading tells us what we should not do, just as much as what we should do. I think Schmoker's work about the fact that many of the commercial programs that are out there making all kinds of promises are actually pretty deficient in those things that we need kids to do most. So this is a place where we've spent a lot of time talking about investing our funds, not in programs, but in our teachers, in professional education, in time for collaborative study, and especially in books. And you all know that every time you see our budget and the payments that go out to professional development. And I am unashamedly taking this time to thank you for investing so much in our teachers and their skill set. We would like to do, and I think this threw you maybe for a loop, perhaps, but what we'd like to do is approach it as a phased adoption. And my guess is that you've had some discussion. I think Dr. Cook said there's been some discussion. Okay, wait a second. We were talking about reading. Why writing now? And we feel a great deal of certainty that the writing units of study will give us tremendous momentum with our teachers. That doesn't mean we're going to continue with the professional development around reading. We'll keep working hard. We'll keep building classroom libraries. But if we start with writing, what I think the rationale is in a slide or two away, but we believe that there's some real advantages to doing that, to starting with the writing. So it's the writing units of study and it's the phonics units of study. So it's those foundational skills. And we'll keep continuing the professional development in reading. Phase 2, how do you all say that? 2021 instead of 2020, 2020. Phase 2, that would be the time. So after this next year, when our teachers have had a chance to really explore the writing units of study, we'll have a strong sense of is our skill set, our competencies, are the conditions, and is the culture ready for the reading adoption. I feel very confident that a year in the writing units of study will help us get there. The reason that I say that, we have good reason to understand through the research that they've done with the writing units of study that gives us great gains right away. So teachers and kids feel some success right out of the chute. Like within a year, they see gains in writing improvement. That's important. That helps a teacher say, this maybe makes sense to really focus on kids writing when it's writing time. If I'm a teacher and I have some reservation about turning kids loose to read and write, and if I see success in letting them do that as writers, I feel much more confident about saying, well, maybe that works as a reading community as well. I believe I gave you more of a detailed description of bullet 3 there, this foundational skill bridge between writing and reading. We know, they say, they can prove that our very youngest readers and writers, if kids start writing right away, even before they've become readers, it gives them a deep and profound sense of phonemic awareness. If you say, I want to write a story about my dog, what sound is that? We start working with foundational skills right away in the course of the kids' writing. And we know that our folks have been asking us for writing curricular resources for a long time. This powerful connection between reading and writing is huge. And this quote about the research was in your packet, I believe. When children are encouraged to write as early as possible, even pre-kindergarten, they develop phonemic awareness in the best way possible. They develop letter sound knowledge. They begin to understand language and story structures in more in-depth ways than if they were learning to read without writing. So I want us to always be careful and not sort of extricate reading from writing or writing from reading. All of those, they go together in the mind, in the child's mind and how it's hardwired. We will continue to work with professional development. We are exploring a contract that might be possible with PEBC where we'd have them come to us once a month to offer professional development in writing for our teachers so that they could walk our teachers through once a month the writing units of study. Our folks would not feel like we've been abandoned and left alone with these funky little units. They'd have help and support. That right there, that fact seemed to gain the biggest support from our content committee to know that they would have support for their writing instruction. The phonics units of study, these are not firm, but the units of study, to imagine a teacher receiving a little box like this with a unit of study for writing, and then to get mentor texts so that kids learn to become better writers by that experience of a mentor text that they experience with the teacher. But to get that instead of a whole bunch of textbooks, there's a big difference in price that way. We'd like to continue to build the classroom libraries of our teachers even while we're actually diving into the writing units of study. And the professional development, of course, doesn't look a whole lot different for phase 2. Reading resources, building classroom libraries, professional development. Is that it? Thank you.
Dr. So can I ask you a question about that? I was curious about building the classroom libraries. So if we're building our school libraries and classroom libraries, is there any redundancy there?
There should be. we should have redundancy, and the reason for that is, and I'm glad you asked that question. And we're not alone, right? We have Opening Books, Opening Doors doing tremendous work on our behalf to help us get classroom libraries and to help us put books in backpacks of children and send them out the door in the summer for our struggling readers. And there are different words for it, but in any reading community, learner-centered reading classroom, and I think you've probably experienced this in our elementary classrooms, you see children have stacks of books. And so if a teacher has brokered a relationship between Gary Paulson, the author, and a 4th grade boy, for instance, what we want to do is have, okay, so if you liked a Hatchet and you want to read Brian's Winter because you want to know what happened next, we want those books handy. We want that smart stack of books. We want books that'll stretch them as readers and books where they can take a, quote, brain break. And we want lots of nonfiction in those stacks. So the more that they have at their fingertips that they can share and argue over with and compare, the better. Running to the library when there's a class in that class in the library is a very difficult thing if we're trying to keep tons of books in their fingertips.
Other questions for Dr. Orozco? I was going to say, I really appreciate it. I think it's, when you think ELA, it's easy to kind of not think about writing. And to me, I think that's maybe where we need the most help or we need support, right? We don't have those materials, as you mentioned, as the content teachers mentioned. So I'm super appreciative as a parent of young kids that's where we're starting with. It makes a lot of sense to me, and I see that as a great jumping off point. So,
thank you. The writing units of study are based in the standards, and that gives us a lot of confidence that our young writers will be becoming much better thinkers as they write.
Okay, thank you. This is like the last one. It's out for information. We'll see it back next month for action. Okay, Dr. Cook, item J is you with a math update. This looks like this is on our secondary math adoptions that we're working through.
It is, and I'm excited to update with you today that the contract that you see in your board book has been agreed upon and signed, and in, let's say, 45 days, we can timestamp this. In 45 days, I'm very excited that we will be able to produce to you feedback from them so that we can confidently say that no less than every bit of our curricular audit would include our integrated math program, and any recommendations and or findings or updates they would give us, we would be very glad to continue to work with them. That the good news is that's not going to be so late that it isn't going to immediately be able to impact the work that we're doing for getting things ready for the next school year. Dr. Cottle and I were talking about aligning current work to this, getting this feedback back, and they're doing work now that they can do that this will blend well into when they get that. And so the good news is by mid-June we'll have materials that can give us guidance and feedback, and we'll be glad to do that. And I'm excited to share that with you, and to validate the work that has been ongoing this year, and to continue to make sure that that product is the absolute best product it can be for our kids.
I just had a detail question. Maybe it says Math 1, but wouldn't Math 1 have already been done in the current audit? So I just didn't know if that was...
All they're doing is with this is giving us feedback on the sequence and all three courses and how they're aligned. So essentially what is being done is taking what work has already been done in Math 1 and extending that all the way through Math 3 and the honors classes.
That's nice they're able to do it so quickly, and yeah.
We asked them to prioritize it, and I think because of the existing relationship and the work that they're coming here in a couple of weeks to present to us, and so they saw this as a natural extension of that work, and so I think they were really able to rush order it for us in effect.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Cook. Any other questions there? All right, we're almost done here. Item K are policies for information, only 2 of them tonight. Hopefully Dean hasn't been sitting around here all this time to talk about one of these. First up, 8220. I think we're just some ISBA rewrites, their recommendations. Any questions on those? I had a suggestion, Ms. Town, on 8220-2. Just that last sentence, the red line area there. And I think it probably needs to read like what's right above it and say, or more than 50% of a school census data, or something to that effect. Because it doesn't quite read right. At least an of, I think, needs to be in there. Anything else?
Nothing, it wasn't about the policy per se, but just a comment in general, reading how frequently our kids have to do the shelter in place or the, what is the new name? Yeah, how many times a year? I know it has to be done, but it is a little bit traumatic for our students. And is there any way to make it easier for them, for these little ones, K-5 in particular? And that's a vague question, but reading this, I know my little one comes home every time, and she's scared every time they practice. And they're practicing, making sure no one can see them. And I think we don't take into account what their little minds think. And so doing it, was it 4 times a year? It was just a comment in general, think, oh man, we're taking their childhood away a little bit, even though I know we need to do it, but how can we, whether it's through story time or some way, acknowledge that this is a fearful process for these little guys?
Yeah, I think that's a valid concern, and it's one that we talk about a lot, and I would love to have Dean talk and reply to that comment. I think that's important.
It doesn't have to be tonight. I was just, when I read this, I was processing for them, oh man,
I agree. I think I'm hoping this is on. It is important for them to understand some of the procedures. A lot of it is that training to involve the teacher with the students at that point, from all the way from K all the way through 12. So our plan is to develop some training for the teachers to teach the students. Hopefully with some of the mental health, behavioral health that we're going to be incorporating too, that will also play into this as well. Unfortunately, the whole situation surrounding this is very terrifying for not only the kids, but adults as well. So
maybe even when we get our mental health professionals hired and they're up and running, be something that we could revisit at the beginning of next year. And even just an acknowledgement for the little ones, and Kate probably could comment even better, that just because we're practicing this doesn't mean it's going to happen. And really, they're such concrete thinkers. You know, they have a hard time, you know, they practice all day long and they get results, but this is one of those things that there's not that correlation, and just because we're practicing it means that it most likely will never happen, or however our mental health professional could translate that to a kindergartner, first grader, or second grader, it would be peace of mind.
correct. And as we build the security of our schools in those entrances, that'll hopefully deter all of that as well.
Dean, are there statutory requirements as far as like fire drills, for example, of frequency, how often those have to be done? Or
as far as fire drills, yes, they are still required to be monthly. As far as the safety holds or lockdowns, there is no requirements at this point. So we were looking at least doing it once a quarter, just so they do know how to do it. A lot of it's going to be like in high schools and middle schools, as those students are moving around during passing and something happens, they need to have that knowledge of what to do if there's no teacher or an adult present. So doing it at least quarterly for the lockdown safety hold, I think, is going to be important.
okay, Ms. Town, on 8300P, the first paragraph there, we have the same sentence to start the paragraph and end it, and it's only a 3-sentence paragraph. So we probably want to strike one of them. I'm guessing. Or it's really important what we're saying there. I'm not sure which. Okay, any other questions on these? Okay. That's information. Those will be out for comment for the next 30 days, and we'll see those back next month. Okay. We are through our information stuff. There's a couple things left here on at the end. Item L, under board information items, are just resolution topics to consider. These were resolutions that the board supported, or the one in the urban renewal districts was something Dr. Cook worked on and recommended to ISBA through their resolution process. And I think the seatbelt one was 2 years ago, I believe. We didn't bring it forward last year, but then Dr. Cook, I believe, had some conversations on that and also on urban renewals. So I think this is on here because if we're going to move these forward, or if we want to consider these again, we need to put them on as discussion topics.
Right, we need a notice up that this would be something that the board would entertain taking to ISBA and making recommendations for one or the other or both.
I'd like to make a couple comments, at least on the seatbelts one. As you know, a couple years ago, we presented a resolution. I have a copy of that resolution that basically wanted them to study the issue, et cetera. And it, went onto the floor of the convention and went down in flames. Not too bad. It's not as bad as I thought it was going to be, but it did go down. So then, since then, of course, last winter, Dr. Cook, you did the working with Representative Addis to do the legislation for identification, and I got some feedback from ISBA that they weren't all excited about that one either. And I sent you a copy of that chain of emails that I got from Karen and from Quinn. So, on the point I'm just trying to make, well, a couple points. One is that I think we need to work with ISBA over something that may actually have a chance of getting executive board endorsement, because they've either been neutral or opposed to it in the past. And part of it is also educational of the board. And I had talked to Karen about possibly at the convention us doing a workshop on our experience with seatbelts and the advantages we think that there are. I talked about maybe Jeff could be involved and myself and a couple other people could be involved. We could actually present a workshop that I think, frankly, would be well attended, considering how much debate we've gotten. I think it would be an interesting issue. So there needs to be, ISBA is not, they're not enthusiastic about this topic, and we have to work with them on this issue, both education and coming up with wording that they could support, because Karen was pretty clear that they're not. She said to me personally, says, I support it, but the executive board doesn't. And so we have some work to do there. So I'm willing to work with you or whoever it is going to be on the resolution that we present at least to this board, and after we've talked to Karen about it and Quinn about it. But I think we should approach this issue again. Obviously you have it on the agenda, so you think so too, or at least something to consider. So I'm not being sure I'm being clear here, because it's later in the evening it gets, the cloudier my head gets. But I think I think we need to. I'd like to work on this, both in terms of a conference issue, but in terms of specifically this agenda item to come up with something we can all agree on. I mean, at least get a neutral out of them again and not opposition. So they didn't get behind us with Representative Addis, right?
They weren't actually they weren't negative about it. They just wanted it to go through the process, and I think this is a little bit of a different lens, is looking at this kind of angle from indemnification for districts that are in the process or willing to take on should we have seatbelts in our buses, and providing that as the new angle on this. So I think that they would they really like and trust their process, and I think they want us to be willing to go through that. That's the feedback I got.
Yeah, and there are questions to Representative Addis that I have a copy of. Pretty clear. They want certain questions answered before they get behind
Right.
this whole thing. So I'm just telling you, I'm willing to work with you
Okay.
and Jeff or whoever else that needs to be involved.
I'd be willing to consider it again. I think it's something we can talk about again, but it appeared to me that they had some serious legal concerns, and whether they were valid or not, I couldn't tell you. But maybe sharing that with Ms. Brumley and just getting her opinion on some of that would help too, in addition to our own counsel. But there might be some, ideas there. On the urban renewal one. I wonder if we don't need to do a little outreach just in regards to the changes that were proposed. I think it was Senator Thane or Mortimer. I can't remember which one it was. And I think it's Mortimer. Had some legislation this year that I believe got through the Senate, didn't in the House, or vice versa. Didn't even get a hearing, I don't think. But it sounds like it's definitely coming back in their support, but it would change that rule with permanency on the levies, and instead of 2 years, you could actually propose up to a 10-year. Right. So you could do anywhere from 3 to 10 is what I read, but I assume it's 2 to 10. I did see something recently, I think on Idaho Ed News, or it might have been the Idaho Statesman, that I didn't catch before, but it said that if, with the way it was written, if that was approved, permanent was out. Yeah. That you couldn't seek permanency anymore. The people who already have it on the books got to keep it, but there would be no new permanent requests. And I think if that were the case, then there's not an issue there anymore because it's voted levies, and the issue is with non-voted levies and the permanent levies. But I think at the very least, it might be something to bring up with Quinn or with Senator Mortimer and see if we can't just, why go through the resolution process if we can just work it into the legislation we know is coming back next year, I guess would be my thought, or at least talk it to him and bring it to his attention through Quinn or through whoever. So yeah, that would be my thought, and then maybe we see where that goes, and we then look for a resolution if we're not making a lot of headway there.
Yeah, we're very much open to both of those conversations. I think that's when we first started talking about the conversation of permanency, I think the thing that single-handedly pushed us back from that was the fact that it creates conflict with urban renewal, and just because of a language mix-up. And so I think that's the part that is the most problematic, is just getting to a point at which the tax burden is spread equally. And so whether that's through I don't think it was, Mortimer was the one who handled it. I think it was actually written by a new legislator, by a rookie legislator, but it got to Mortimer's desk, and they were actually really interested in hearing that, but died for a lack of some reason. So
They just ran out of time.
yeah.
Okay, so to me, it sounds like, and let's make sure we're on the same page, we're going to have some conversations, and this may be coming back for our consideration, depending on those conversations. Okay, last thing, calendar updates. This is like a small blush of what we actually have, but these are the actual board things. There's lots going on this month and lots next month with graduations and negotiations and budgets and all those sorts of things. So keep that in mind and keep up on your phone. Ms. Brumley, you're going to be gone that June 3rd board meeting, correct?
Yes.
Okay.
So I'm gone the 31st until the 10th. I get home really late on the 10th. So that whole chunk of time, anything going on there, I won't participate in. As much as you might want me to call in, I will be too far off in the time zone, I think, to participate.
Okay. Well, we finished slightly ahead of schedule. Nice work, Ms. Town. You nailed it pretty much. So nice work with your estimates.
It's still light out.
And with that, we'll say meeting adjourned.